Oh, okay, gotcha.
And is this working? I'm getting a black screen on the live stream. Can somebody in the live chat tell me if this is working? Hopefully it is, or else I'll have to restart the stream.
Let me try to look it up. It looks live.
Can you see my video and everything? Alright, yes, people are saying yes. Okay. That's annoying.
Yeah, there's an ad playing right now. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So yes, do you want to introduce yourself then?
Absolutely. Okay. Yep. So, my name's Anarcheosis. I'm a small YouTuber, basically. A couple months ago, I decided to make a YouTube channel just because I was really interested in philosophy and economics. Um, so yeah, basically, I've been getting into the YouTube sphere. I basically watch a lot of debates and politics all my life, and I decided to finally make the jump and start talking to people. And so I watched a lot of your videos, and I want to have discussions with lots of people. I talked with Sithis. I'm going to talk with Fabian Liberty at some point, and I'm talking to you now. So, yeah.
Cool. So you had a problem with my justification of the non-aggression principle, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, to be clear, I don't know how long it'll take for us to do this. Probably not very long, but I've got a few topics just in case we do finish this early. But with that being said, I can go ahead and give you my case why I have a problem with the NAP justification. So let me start by saying that I'm an anarchist. So obviously, I agree with the NAP. But here's my problem. I think that the NAP is the best practical solution for economics and politics, but I'm not convinced that it's the best moral. I'm not convinced that it has any moral justification for it. So I basically went through all the moral justifications, and since we're not going to have an argument about practicality, we can make this strictly morally justified. So I'm interested in hearing your case for moral justifications, if you have any, unless you agree with me in which the case that you just agree with the practicality of the NEP and not just the moral justifications of it.
Sure. So I think I do have a moral justification. The basic argument is that because we have this thing called scarcity, people can come into conflicts, right? Crusoe and Friday can try and use the same stick where counter ends at the same time, can't both happen at the same time, so that's conflict, right? There are three ways we could go about trying to solve this as ethical philosophers. We could use the law of the jungle, where it's just like anything goes, might makes right, who cares about trying to resolve conflicts, that type of thing. Then there's the non-aggression principle, which says that the person who initiated the conflict there should not be the one who is able to go forth. And then there's the mixed law system, which is just some in between. And I think both the law of the jungle and mixed law fall into what I call the primacy of consciousness, which is a stolen concept fallacy. So because those are both out, we're left with only the NEP as the reasonable solution to law.
Yeah, no, I agree with you about the law, but wouldn't you say that the law is practical, not moral?
No, I would say the law is moral. I don't think there is. I don't think something can be practical but not moral either.
Oh, so you see them as the same thing?
And moreover, that if I don't see like a dichotomy where it's like, okay, well, we've got to be practical here, and therefore we've got to just abandon morality. I think it is impractical to abandon morality. You're not actually going to achieve anything good if you abandon morality, because morality is specifically telling you how to live the good life.
What? So the point of morality is to live a good life, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a yeah.
Yeah.
So doesn't that just mean it's a means to an ends? If your if your ends is trying to live a good life, and you use morality to achieve that, isn't that just consequentialism?
No,
That's practicality, right?
because what ethics is doing is it's telling you what is required to live the good life, i.e., what you should be doing. That it's not
Right, it's the means.
But like the ideology itself is not the means. The ethics itself isn't the means. Just as metaphysics isn't a means, but it's the theory of about how the universe is. Similarly, ethics is the theory about how man should conduct his life.
Okay, wait. So I might be a little bit confused. So from what I understand, you don't see a differentiation between moral in a practical sense and a intrinsic sense. I see those things as distinct because I see this as utilitarians will essentially say that moral is practical. So what we need to do is the thing that's most practical, and that's morality, meaning, like taxes, Keynesian ethics, communism, all that shit. And then there will be deontologists and moral virtue ethicists who will say that we do something because it is good. We don't do something because it's good for us. We do something because it's intrinsically good. So I see those things as distinct. I see moral practicality and moral objectivity as two distinct things.
Right. I think this is a false alternative you've given me here. You're saying either we've got to be pragmatists, and then it's all just about practicality, or we've got to be intrinsicists, where it's some sort of duty ethics. I think that's a false alternative here, because being practical doesn't mean abandoning morality. It doesn't mean doing bad things. Things can be bad without it being some sort of rule decreed onto people by God.
Okay. I mean, so I don't think practicality actually links with intrinsic morality. Practicality describes what works in the world, but it doesn't necessarily tell us what ought to be done from a moral standpoint. And that kind of brings us to the is-ought gap, doesn't it?
We can go there if you want, sure.
But isn't that what it does? You haven't solved the is-ought gap, have you?
Oh, I absolutely have, and I don't think it poses any sort of
you
problem at
have.
all. So there's this argument against it called companions in guilt. So what the is-ought gap, Hume's guillotine, right? What Hume is claiming is that, well, you should only believe in certain things. You should only believe in things that you can see, or taste, touch, things that some reputable guy tells you about, yada 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 yada, right? He's just giving the standard sensualist claim there. But that itself is an epistemic norm. He's saying you should only believe in these things. But wait a minute, his epistemic norm here is supposed to exclude any sort of should claims. So it defeats itself. It cannot stand as any sort of attack on any morality.
Wait, so then why ought we do something?
Well, then you're asking for the positive case. So in law, I gave the basic positive case above, that the three possibilities, out of the three possibilities we have, the non-aggression principle is the only one that it doesn't rely on a stolen concept. So the NEP is the only one that we have left. So it's the correct solution to law. That's the positive case for the NEP.
So for example, if you got out of bed today, if I ask you why you got out of bed today, what would your answer be?
So I had work to do.
Why would you do work?
Well, because if I don't do work, then I'm not producing anything, and then I'll live either as a parasite, which I think is profoundly evil, or I'll die, right? And I don't want to die, so.
Okay, why don't you want to die?
Well, why would I want to die? Right?
Or why ought you not die? What?
Why would I want to die is the question.
Well, I think the better question is why would you want to live?
Why is that the better question? It would be like if we were each.
When you live, you are.
It would be sort of like if we were both.
Because man
It would be
acts.
sort of like if we were both out in public, and then you're like, "Pfft, isn't it weird right now that none of us are eating shit? Why is that? Like, I mean, like,
Yeah.
we've both
Well, because
accepted that
that's
living is
wouldn't that be a
good, right?
negative? My question.
Yeah, it would be a negative. So would dying,
So
right?
I
Living is
specifically
good. That's why I want to live.
I specifically love when you bring up praxeology. Sorry, go ahead.
Sure. So living is a good thing. I think clearly we both accept this. I'm not sure where you're going to go with that.
Why is living a good thing?
Well, life is the standard of ethics. It doesn't make any sense. Like, you can't have a value which is death. That's a stolen concept. It doesn't make any sense to say that. It doesn't make any sense to you are operating on just complete utter falsehood if you are engaged in a pursuit of death. Now, I can elaborate on this. So, that you have this concept of value, we have to ask, where is this a primary, or does value rely on something before it for you to even have that concept in the first place? And the answer that Ayn Rand gives, which, I mean, we could go into that if you wanted, but it is an NAP debate. The answer that she gives is that the concept of value relies on the concept life, because it's only for living beings that value means anything at all. It's only living beings which have the alternative of existence or non-existence, so they have to pursue things, right, to keep themselves existing. That's why a rock doesn't have values, it doesn't pursue anything, because it's not alive.
Okay.
So I would consider...
No, that's fair.
So then, specifically related to your question there then, the alternative of keeping alive, living the good life, that is, where it's like, well, why shouldn't we pursue death? Well, that's just a stolen concept. You're pursuing something whilst eschewing any sort of standard of value. So then what the hell does a value mean?
Yeah, that's a good question. What the hell is a value? But I think this brings us back to the question of why should we do anything? And the question kind of hints at a more fundamental, like intuitive response, right? I would say that it probably boils down to a certain intuitionism where why do we act? We act intuitively and we act purposefully, but we act purposefully based on our intuitions and our preferences. And so we need to sort of, I guess, deconstruct what that means as an intuition and see why we ought to do anything. Because, and hear me out for a second, we might disagree on this. It appears to me that the most logical outcome of life, if your meaning in life and your purpose in life is to maximize pleasure and minimize pain, is to just choose non-existence. Because I would argue that the vast majority of people live a more painful life than a good life. So wouldn't the logical ends of that just be choosing non-existence so that you could have peace?
Well, you've gone through a few different threads there. I'll address the first one first, right? I don't think that why ought we do something is just based on intuition. If somebody is acting on intuition, that means they just haven't checked their premises fully enough. The reason why we ought to do things is because we are living beings, right? So we need to pursue values to stay alive, or else we go out of existence.
Okay. So you said something. You said check your premises. This sounds like logic, which means that you're saying something. Logic is something that is, right? Logic can't inform us what we should do unless you think you can make that case.
Why can't logic inform us?
Because there's no evidence.
There's plenty of evidence for everything.
There's no evidence for it.
What claim did I make which lacked evidence?
You haven't made a claim for why we should live.
I made it earlier. I said that the alternative is a stolen concept fallacy. I evidenced that fully.
So Okay, wait. So unpack this a little more. What you mean by the stolen concept fallacy? What fallacy am I committing right now?
Sure. So it's a conceptual fallacy rather than a logical fallacy. What it means is that you're using a concept whilst rejecting the validity of a concept on which it depends. So I can give an example, a different example outside of ethics. So you know the classic phrase from, I believe, Proudhon, where he says property is theft. This is an example of the stolen concept fallacy, because theft, that refers to illegitimately possessing property, but then he is saying that property is itself theft, right? He's stolen the concept of property here, or rather,
Right.
theft. He's done it to both. It's a little bit circular, you see.
Right, because you can't have theft without property. That makes sense.
Yeah, and he's rejecting that property is a legitimate thing. So yeah, it would be theft that he's stolen the concept of, which is funny.
Okay, so then what did I steal a concept of when I said why ought we live?
So you're so that specifically isn't stealing concept. I'm saying the alternative to life is the standard is stealing the concept of value, because the concept of value, you only get to that because you have the prior concept of life. It makes no sense to have value as just this floating thing. You can't just have, because value is not the primary. So all of these ethical theorists, plenty of them at least throughout history, they've treated value as something intrinsic, which is one of the examples you gave, where it's just some command from God, do this just because. That is stealing the concept of value, because what do they actually mean by value there? It means value is when you obey God's word, right? That's not what it means, right? But if we actually look out and we actually observe where values come from, where we see values, we don't see values in inanimate matter. We only see it in living beings. It's only living beings that pursue things. It's only living beings that do this stuff. So it is life that is the prerequisite and standard of value. And what I mean by standard is that you need some sort of way to evaluate, right? Some way to pick what you're going to pursue, right? It can't just be whatever you want, because that is called whim worship, which rests on a whim epistemology, which is the claim that this is true because I feel like it's true, right? So the problem with just having a floating ought is that oughts aren't floating. They are rooted in this recognition of life as the standard. Anything else is just utterly meaningless.
Interesting. I mean, I'm not sure I would agree that oughts are rooted in the standard of living. But so, for example, let me walk you through something and I can get your thoughts on this. Okay. So back before when we were talking, I was trying to get to something and I have to remember exactly what it was. But okay, yes. So praxeology. The first axiom in praxeology is man acts purposefully, or as you like to say, man acts, because purposefully is what is it? It's implicit in saying that.
Sure.
So man acts.
I'll clarify. It depends on which sense you're using acts. So metaphysicians will often say that there's an action of a balloon to float under natural atmospheric conditions, whatever, right? We can say purposely acts, that's fine, or behaves purposefully or acts. It depends on which debate you want to have right now. If we want to be in economics, then I think it's a good shorthand to just speak of action as meaning human action, because economics obviously only applies to humans, right?
Right. Okay. Yeah. So man acts, and from what it appears to be, is man acts purposefully. And so this would mean that a man has a reason or a why they act. Something, but I would argue that we don't know what this is. Like obviously we know on a surface level what this is. We have values, we have whims, we have desires, things that we prefer to do, and we do those things. But are those things, what do those things all lead to? Is it pleasure or is it something else?
It's choice. So the fundamental here is choice. So there are the primary choice would be whether to focus or evade. Sorry, whether to focus or drift, and the secondary choice is whether to think or evade. It's from this fundamental concept of choice, free will, volition, that you get the rest. So your whims and all that, it's all going to be based on your prior choices.
It's funny that you say that because I've been trying so long to logically prove that that there's pleasure and there's choice, and I'm pretty sure I debunked pleasure by saying that at the end of the day, if you seek a life of pleasure, you will end up choosing non-existence because that logically makes more sense if you're living a life of suffering. But what I can't logically prove is that man lives for choice. I can't figure out how to logically prove that.
He doesn't live for choice. That wasn't my claim. My claim was that
He lives to choose.
My claim is that the basis of praxeology, these purposes that man has, that is all based in choice. So it's because man chooses, that's why he has purposes, right? And that's why praxeology doesn't apply to plants, because plants don't choose, they don't have purposes.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. Okay. So okay. I went through the different justifications I could figure out, which is just a bunch of different moral justifications, and I basically don't find any of these as good evidence. So I have everything from natural rights to natural law to deontological ethics to moral absolutism. And you can just stop me with any of these points you want to argue with. So my problem with natural rights, and to be clear, natural rights is each individual inherently owns themselves. Do you disagree with that?
It might be more efficient if we just go for my justification, right? Because I don't know what other justifications you've read. So my justification was, out of the three possible solutions to law, the NAP is the only one which is non-fallacious, so it's the correct one.
Okay, but when you say correct, what do you mean? What do you mean it's correct?
Well, the others are incorrect.
It's the one that reduces the most amount of conflict?
No. We have this problem of conflict, which, so we can legitimately ask the question as ethicists, how should we deal with conflicts? The law of the jungle and mixed law both rely on fallacy, so the NAP is the only correct one. Right? It's like if I rolled a dice, a six-sided dice, and I tell you, hey, the number which appeared on the dice was not the number 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Which number appeared? Clearly you're going to go, oh, it was 6 that appeared, because I've eliminated all other possibilities. And I've done the same here. I've eliminated every other possible solution to conflict that you could ever have, leaving us with only the non-aggression principle.
Okay, but okay. So when I ask you for a moral justification for the NEP, and you say that it's the only, I guess, system that's non-contradictory.
I'm not sure if non-contradictory is the right word, because it's not necessarily the case that the law of the jungle and mixed law necessarily go into contradictions. They certainly do go into a lot of contradictions. But the fundamental error to both of them is the stolen concept fallacy, which is found because they both rely on the primacy of consciousness.
Okay. Wait, so can I ask what your presuppositions are so that we can get to a base level root of this?
What do you mean by what my presuppositions are?
So do you believe in moral objectivism? I'm assuming you do, since you believe in morality.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's probably a good route for us to go. Let me see. Okay. So moral objectivism. I have my problems with moral objectivism. Moral objectivism seems to be this idea that there is intrinsic moral value, and from your perspective, it seems like you would link this with practicality. So
hold on.
What?
You've made a mistake there. You've conflated objective and intrinsic there. Like that there is objectively correct things in morality, that you can be objective in morality, that doesn't imply that morality is some rules coming from outside of you, just imposed upon you.
I'm confused because moral objectivism is the idea that morality exists independent of us, right?
Well, if that is what is meant by moral objectivism, then I'm not a moral objectivist. I'm an objectivist, and objectivism holds that you can indeed come to a rational morality.
Okay, but when you let me tell you something I agree with, and then because maybe this is just a semantic thing, and it might just be. My presupposition for why I live is rational self-interest, right? So egoism, Ayn Rand egoism.
Well, yeah, that's
the way I see it is. I'm not entirely.
That's my position as well.
Yeah, I guess it's a form of subjectivism. Yeah.
No, objectivism.
And I'm not objective. What do you mean objectivism?
Like the philosophy is called objectivism.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. Yes, exactly. So the way I see it is, but okay, I'll make this exception. We know that it's true that everyone is a psychological egoist. This is true, and the reason for this is because the self does what the self wants. And I've seen you made this point a million times. You cannot act against your preferences, and that is because you do what you desire.
Sure, right? If that's what is meant by psychological egoism, then it's correct.
Correct. Now, here's the problem with when it comes to morality. I agree, if we're going to agree on morality being practical, then I agree with you. That is practical morality, and that's you are achieving the things that are best for yourself. But I have a problem with intrinsic morality, saying that people ought to be egoists. Right? So I don't think you can make an ethical case for egoism.
So when you're saying that you're an Ayn Rand rational egoist, you don't think this is an ethics?
It depends on how you're using the word ethics. Because it really does come down to practical versus intrinsic.
So, this is related to a topic in objectivism, where Ayn Rand, instead of having the subjective-objective dichotomy, she gives a trichotomy, which is subjective, objective, intrinsic, where for Ayn Rand, objective means some connection between your mind and existence, reality, right? Whereas intrinsic is out there only, and subjective is in here only. In ethics, these would be, the subjectivists would be the whim worshippers, and the intrinsicists would be some sort of duty ethics or something similar.
And the objectivists would be egoists?
Yes.
Okay.
And specifically, they would be rational egoists.
But we can't make
Nietzsche.
Yeah, exactly. We'd be rational egoists, meaning low time preference. So we agree on that.
I'm not sure rational egoism means low time preference.
No, but if you're intelligent, you're low time preference.
I mean, low and high time preference are relative terms, right? Like low time preference compared to what is the question?
What do you mean by relative?
So I can't just say in a vacuum.
Meaning long term.
I can't just say in a vacuum, like John is low time preference, like lower time preference than he used to be, than he will be in the future. Like, you know?
Yeah, I just mean invests in his future.
Sure, I think that is, for the most part, a virtue, but that isn't the essential when it comes to rational egoism.
Okay. But so, for example, and so the way I use the NAP is that it's the best practical use of law, right? So I'm an egoist first, and this means that I do act in my self-interest. And my self-interest requires that I'm free and the people around me are free. And next we get into law, which is the implementation of enacting the best things for myself. And this would be the NAP. The NAP would be the foundation for the law because it informs my rational self-interests. It's best for me.
Mhm.
And so I see it as a good practical use case. I don't see it as a should, though, and ought.
Right. So do you think there are no oughts? It's never legitimate to say you should do this or that or the other thing?
I think that I'm not convinced that normative oughts exist, right? I know that oughts exist as in I like to be healthy, so I'm going to go to the gym this year. That's an ought, but like normative oughts, that's a different case together because you would sort of have to be presupposing that morality exists and you have to know what morality is.
Right, but I mean, so Ayn Rand is giving an ethics here, right? She's saying that you should live for your own self-interest, that you should be productive, that you should be judicious, all these different things, right? But like, I'm not. If you're not giving an ethics
so
here,
that?
is the claim you're making then just that you feel like doing things for yourself? Like, if so, then what is the rational part of this egoism doing? Like, what makes it rational egoism as against just egoism? I'm not even sure what this.
Yeah, but
I'm not even sure how
point?
this would classify as egoism, even because you're not even claiming that this is an ethics.
Right. So, I mean, yeah. So, like, egoism is the idea that, and this is, I guess, this hints at the deeper point I'm getting towards, which is, egoism is serving your self-interests. But how is that ethical, right? How is that like we know that people do certain things, and this is why I'm skeptical of morality because I like what is, meaning we know that people are egoists. We know that people want to serve their self-interests, but we can't necessarily make that bridge between the is and the ought, which is
Well, why can't we make the bridge?
People do like to live, but why? Because there's no evidence for it.
Well, I'm confused by what you mean. So you just think that there isn't any evidence that you can go from is to ought?
Yeah. So because you would need to know what ought means, and like I don't think that any of us even know what that means.
I mean, I think everybody knows what ought means. If I say you should do this, that, or the other thing, I think there's very few people on planet Earth who would not understand what I'm saying by that. And this strikes me as a sort of your claim almost strikes me as a little bit arbitrary. Like, what is the evidence that there is some special thing going on from is to ought that you can't get from is to ought, but you can get from is to is? Like, is that not a special claim? Like if I said, "Oh no," if I came up with Liquid Zulu's guillotine here, and I said, "Well, you can't get from any facts about physics to facts about what the weather will be," right? Because I just haven't seen the evidence for it, and you've got to show me the entire chain of like reasoning which gets you from facts about physics into facts about what the weather's going to be. Like, give me an entire meteorology course now. Like that, I'm making the arbitrary claim there. And I think you're making the arbitrary claim here by saying, well, there just isn't any evidence that we can go from is to ought. And I also believe that I did already provide a way to get from is to ought.
So if that's true, then you can answer this question. And also, if that's true, I'm not sure if you have any like logical syllogisms that would prove that you can get from what is logical to what you should do. But here's my question for you.
I don't
Why should I live?
I don't like the alternative you've given me there of what is logical or what you should do. Like, I think it is logical, rational to do what you should do. That's why we say that's what you should do.
Okay. But yeah, so like how would you apply this to my question, why should I live?
Well, so let's take the alternative here, which is, oh, let's just all die when there's no point to it at all. That is taking a sort of, it might be a subjectivist, but I'll just stick with the intrinsicist case here for now. Maybe the reason why we should all die is because God said we should all die. I think this is a stolen concept, right? It's treating value as just being some primary, some floating thing. You just got to obey it because it's the law, right? You just got to obey it because that's what the ought says. I don't think that this is true. I don't think oughts are some command coming from out there. I think that you should do these things, but not because they're just commands, right? So why you should live? Well, why should you die, right? They already described earlier that the standard of value is life. So how, if life is the standard of value, how could you possibly get to death ethics that you should pursue death? Like I don't see how that could ever come about.
So
right?
what if it's the case that my life is just so painful that I choose to not exist? Wouldn't that make sense if I would choose not exist? If my life was just more painful than it was pleasurable?
Depends on what you mean by would it make sense. I mean, I could understand why someone would do that. I mean, I'm not an idiot, right? I understand the reasons why somebody might want to, commit suicide or something. But is it rational of them to do this? No.
Why isn't it rational?
Because life is the standard of value.
Are you saying life is inherently valuable?
I'm saying it's the standard by which you choose values. Or at least the proper standard by which you should choose values.
So, I mean, it's true that while you're alive, you do have values and you will choose the thing that you value. But I guess what is it that we value? At the end of the day, doesn't it come down to like pleasure?
Not inherently, because the pleasure pain mechanism, that's just on the perceptual level, but I don't think that's all you can get. There's such a thing as conceptual level. Like I often pursue things which in the moment I might not be orgasming over them or something. I take cold showers in the morning. I think it's better for me. So if the claim then is a psychological claim that people are necessarily going to just be hedonists, well, clearly not, because there are people who aren't hedonists.
Okay. So what if I broaden my definition of pleasure to involve all forms of pleasure, including, satisfaction in life and, the feelings of pleasure from gaining wisdom and having a family and, being 80 and looking back at your life and being satisfied. If I broaden that to pleasure, would there be anything else other than to live for pleasure?
So that sounds like it would be, in objectivist literature, the concept of joy. So joy would cover all those sorts of things. That's on the emotional level. Now, you can have contradictory joys, is the thing. You could want something which is actively detrimental to yourself and is going to just blow up in your face because you're just ignoring reality, right? So what Rand says is proper is non-contradictory joy, which he calls happiness. I mean, so happiness is definitely a good goal to have, to be happy. Like that I'm not denying that one bit. But I don't think it is the primary here.
Wait, that's interesting. I've always heard that joy was like long-term and happiness was short-term, but you're saying it's inverted?
No, I'm saying they're both on the emotional level. Happiness would be a subset. It's non-contradictory joy. You could be joyful over, some sort of contradictory thing. Because you're ignoring reality. Maybe you get really, really joyful, because you gave a bunch of money away, but you needed that money. Like that would be a state of contradictory joy.
But Sure. So, okay, but at the end of the day, objectivists were physicalists, were materialists, right? Ayn Rand
Whoa.
rejects the religion, the metaphysical in some senses,
That doesn't
right?
mean that we're materialists. So materialism is the claim that there is only matter in motion, that there is no faculty of consciousness. This is another false alternative that Rand identifies, the idealist materialist false alternative. You can be.
Do you think consciousness is metaphysical?
Well, depend. Like I don't know what you mean by that.
Well, because you said it's not physical, so it has to be something else, right?
Okay. Well, it has a basis in physical reality. That doesn't mean that everything is just matter in motion. Like there is a faculty
Well, like
of
for
consciousness.
example, what's not?
Well, for instance, a concept that isn't a physical thing. They'll have some correspondent in, like,
It isn't?
like neurons in your brain or whatever. But like the concept dog, that's not like I can't go out and find the concept dog. Like there isn't going to be a cluster of atoms which is, oh yes, that is the concept God, or dog rather.
You sound like a nominalist. Is that a nominalist position?
No. So the nominalist, they accept that there is such a thing as consciousness, but they deny the conceptual faculty particularly. I do not deny the conceptual faculty.
Okay, so would you disagree with Aristotle realism being the idea that everything is like within the physical universe? So, like, first of all, universals are in the universe, but the way I see this is that mathematics are physically represented in the universe. I would say that the laws of logic are physically represented in the universe. I wouldn't say that there's any metaphysical nature around them, about them. It just means that they are part of everything in the universe because everything operates on them.
Right, so I reject Aristotle's position that the concepts are like out there. I don't think they're out there in the objects. I think that it's your mind which performs a process of abstraction and creates these mental entities. Right, they aren't physical entities out there.
But isn't mental physical?
But I mean, it'll be. You could describe it physically, but you're not getting the full picture there. Like you could say these neurons were doing this, that, and the other thing. But you could also say this guy was thinking about this stuff.
But that is exactly what I mean. Like at the end of the day, aren't these mental metaphysical concepts we're referring to, aren't they really just neurochemical?
They'll probably have some sort of neurochemical basis. I mean, I'm not a neurologist or anything. But yeah, I imagine there are some chemicals up there which is the physical basis for your consciousness.
Okay, yeah, but so like that's my point. That's what the hell were we talking about? We started talking about physicalism, and I think I was going somewhere, but I totally forgot what my point was. You don't have your spreadsheet out, do you?
I do, but I wasn't following where you were going.
Oh, it's okay. It's cool. But at the end of the day, I was just questioning the point of just because we have values, it doesn't mean that we ought to pursue our values. Do you see what I'm saying? We do have values, that's true, but why should we pursue our values?
Sure, that you value something doesn't imply that you should pursue it. Like, I wasn't making that claim. Like, I think people pursue all sorts of bad things.
But this gets at the heart of morality, because morality is a normative ought claim, where it's like we are trying to get to something, and I want to understand what that thing is, and I don't know what it is.
I mean, what is insufficient about the explanation I gave you earlier. That is, living things which need to pursue certain materials and whatnot in order to stay alive. And that is the basis for value. And then when we get into the volitional beings, that's when we have actual ethics to guide man on how he should think. Guide man on what choices he should make.
But so, for example, like, don't people live because they value to live?
Yep.
And also, on the other hand, people die because they value to die.
Yep. If I think that they would have a bunch of false premises going on there, but sure, they would consider it a value to die.
Sure. But at the end of the day, when we're talking about these things, we're still in the realm of is. We haven't gotten to ought yet, because
Right,
ought would infer that we ought to chase our values.
I think it's an arbitrary claim to say, well, and we of course we can't go from is to ought. Like, I think that's an arbitrary claim, and you need to evidence that claim, or else I'm just going to drop it from the flow, right?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Sure. So I think your claim that we can't get from is to ought, I think that's an arbitrary claim. In the same way that my hypothetical claim, that you can't get from the laws of physics into what the weather will be tomorrow, that would also be an arbitrary claim. I would have to evidence that somehow. And you have to evidence somehow that you can't get from is to ought. Now, one way you might try and do that is Hume's guillotine, but I displayed earlier that Hume's guillotine fails as an attack. So the claim is left as being arbitrary. So it can't be considered.
Would you mind sending me, like, after this debate, like, I don't know, like an article or like a syllogism or some reasoning that you believe you've crossed is ought gaps, that I can understand that better?
Sure, I mean, you could read Virtue Selfishness by Ayn Rand. Or if you want my argument for the NEP in particular, I could give you that as well.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be interested in hearing that. Just because I tend to learn things better a lot when I'm just like reading them on my own rather than like talking about it. But yeah, I would appreciate that. I still don't understand how you can get from is to ought. And I'm probably not going to get that for this conversation. So we can just drop that topic and I will read whatever you send to me later.
Sure.
Dope.
So did you have other topics then?
We agree that egoism.
Oh, sorry.
I do have other topics, yes. Okay, cool. So we agree that egoism. Do you believe that egoism is a logical axiom? Because I think I created a logical axiom for egoism.
No, I would not consider it an axiom. I reserve axiom for some very, very specific things. It's right down into the metaphysics, I should say. So, as far as I see it, there are 3 axioms, and 2 of them are actually pointing at the same fact. That shows you how selective I am with this. The 3 axioms are existence exists, the law of identity, and the axiom of consciousness. So one way you could state this is there is something of which I am aware. That gives you those 3 axioms. Because there is something that tells you existence exists. There is something that tells you the law of identity, and that gives you existence as identity there. Of which I am aware gives you that you're conscious, right? So those are the only 3 axioms.
Yeah.
I wouldn't consider
those are the only 3 axioms. Okay, interesting.
You should act in your own self-interest. I think that's way, way up there into the ethics. Just in the same way I
didn't claim that you should act in.
And that's why I don't consider. That's some people call it the non-aggression axiom. I don't think it's an axiom. I call it the non-aggression principle.
Well, yeah, it's obviously not an axiom. But yeah, so okay, let me read this to you, and then you can tell me what you think about this. But basically, I created this. I guess you could, maybe not a logical axiom, but you could call it a axiom, or a, like, I don't know, praxeological axiom or something. the self does what the self wants. So the idea is this statement is axiomatic and logically undeniable within how we understand human behavior. The statement is tautological because it essentially defines action as being driven by what the self wants. By definition, an action is taken by an individual. An action is taken by an individual is something they choose to do based on their desires or preferences. It's basically true definitionally. And I've heard you argue this before, that you cannot act against your preferences. You would agree with that at least, right?
Yeah, and if that's the psychological egoist claim that you do something because you wanted to do that thing, yes, but I don't think that is ethical egoism. I think you can act altruistically. Like what you want might be to destroy yourself, right? And I wouldn't consider that egoist.
You would not consider that egoist?
I would not.
But isn't that what you want to do?
Yep.
Then how would that deny your preferences?
Well, egoism doesn't say follow your preferences. Egoism is just, as far as ethics is concerned.
What does egoism say?
Well, as far as ethics is concerned.
Oh, ethical egoism.
As far as ethics is concerned, egoism just means that you should be the recipient of moral values.
Okay, interesting. Okay, I have two more corollaries to this that you, I think, will definitely disagree with. The first one is I see that consequentialism is a logical corollary of psychological egoism. And if you want, I can read out that syllogism.
Sure.
But essentially, the idea is that if you start with the axiom, the self does what the self wants. Premise one would be the self does what the self wants. Premise two would be what the self values most are the outcomes or consequences of actions, particularly the outcomes that the self wants. And the premise three would be an action is chosen because its expected outcome aligns with what the self values most. And then the conclusion is that therefore individuals are inherently consequentialists because they act based on the outcomes that they value.
All right. So I think this is again taking a sort of idiosyncratic view of what consequentialism means, because consequentialism is an ethical position. You've not introduced any sort of ethic here. You just stated essentially people act for outcomes that they are wanting to act for, which is, yeah.
But don't you think that would inform their ethical position?
It might, if they're a whim worshipper.
But okay, I understand your point that okay, this is interesting. So yeah, it's true that consequentialism is a meta-ethical view. It's a meta-ethical view, or is it a normative view? I forget.
I was referring to it as an ethical view, which I suppose in your terminology would be normative. It's saying that we should go for the best outcome, whatever best outcome means.
Okay, interesting. I would just say that ethics aside, a person will do what they want to do. The means be damned, right? So they will kill 100 people if it satisfies them. They will blow up the world if it satisfies them, because they will always act according to their preferences. So it's true that that's not an ethical position, but it's more of just like an additional corollary to the idea that the self does what the self wants.
Sure. I mean, I'm not sure how much ground you want to go over on this psychological egoism position, because I'm not going to disagree with any of it, but it's not going to count as an ethic at all.
Okay. Well, then we probably agree on that then. But yeah, no, that's interesting. Okay. Okay. So Another thing I wanted to talk to you about. I watched your debate with Scott about open borders, and while I will admit I'm not the best debater when it comes to I don't know, like borders and stuff. I do believe that. Well, I'll just say I have a question for you, which is the idea that you guys were talking about. You're for the position that we should have an open borders because the government has land that they do not have a right to, and since they're not going to give it back to the people, that they're custodians for, we should essentially just make it. I forget the term you used. It might have been like unhomesteaded land or uncollectivized land or something. That we should allow immigrants to basically homestead that land so that someone has the land. But I have a problem with this, and my problem is where does the restitution go, right? So the idea is that if the U.S. owns all the land in the U.S. and the taxpayers have been paying the government, taxes for whatever hundreds of years, and the government just essentially releases this land and lets other people take it, aren't they essentially releasing the restitution, and they're now getting rid of the restitution that they owe the American people?
Well, I disagree with the initial premise there. You said if the government owns all the land and yada yada yada. I disagree that the government owns all the land. But so I suppose the separate claim is, well, for some public possession that they control, should the state be allowed to prevent people from taking that from them? My position is no, because they don't own it. You can only exclude people from that which you own, because ownership is exclusion.
Okay. So if the government decided to, actually, I saw an article on this, I think by Reason or something, where recently the government, like a state government or something, like took some lady's house away and then sold it and kept the profits. If the government takes our land and then they sell it, and then they do whatever they want with the profits, and then you can say they don't own that land, but they're possessing that land. If they possess that land, are they allowed to give it to someone else for free? In which case, that person now owns the land, and the government successfully stole it from you, and also they don't have to pay restitution, right?
Yeah, that has never been my position. My position has always been that, if you have a house and the government takes that house from you, you still own that house. You own it the whole time, no matter how many pretensies trades they do with it, right? You own it the entire time. So if you can demonstrate that you own something, then yeah, go ahead, take it. I have no problem with that. My problem is whether or not the state has a right to exclude people from the entire territory that they claim to own, because I don't think that they own any of it. So they don't have the right to do any of that. So if I want to go into some New Mexico desert, cross the border, I should be allowed to do that, and the government doesn't have a right to stop me.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I was just interested in that because I was wondering where the restitution went, but yeah, that's cool.
I mean, most of the restitution's been completely destroyed because the government is a destructive force.
Yeah.
Like, this shouldn't surprise anyone.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, that was my big problem, because the idea is that I don't disagree with you necessarily that it's better for someone to make use of the land instead of the government possessing it. I think that's far better. But my only problem was if the government takes land away from you or prevents you from using land, and they say they create like a national park or whatever, and they have park services there, and they spend money and resources to build bridges and I don't know, other structures and facilities. Wouldn't they technically owe that restitution? The property that they built on and the facilities themselves, wouldn't they owe that to the American people?
Well, I don't think the American people can own something. So no, you can't owe anything to the American people, because the American people.
How about the individuals that make up the United States?
Well, I mean, each individual would have to show, hey, I actually own this thing and that's this other thing, right?
Well, yeah, but right now we're just talking about a middleman. So, for example, the government takes the government taxes people, so they take their money away every year. And the thing is, the government also has no money. They're what is they currently like $35 trillion in debt and like 200 trillion and whatever and whatever. They don't have any money to give the people. So, what does a bank do when a person doesn't have money? They start taking away their assets. So in the same way, wouldn't the government have to sell that property and then restitute people with the money that they get from that sale?
I don't think they can sell anything. I don't think you can sell something that you don't own.
Then who does the facility go to?
Well, then it's up for homesteading, right? I think that's the only option left. Either you can.
I don't understand.
Either you can.
So
Hold on. Either you can demonstrate that some particular individual owns that piece of property, or you can't, and it's not owned by anyone in particular, in which case it's not owned by anybody, so it's free for homesteading.
Okay, so basically the government taxes people, so the people give them their money, and then the government makes a park with this money.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So essentially what you're saying is now that they built this park with this money is now gone. It's evaporated.
No,
they no longer owe restitution to the people that they stole.
I don't think the money has evaporated. If you could track down where that money went, then you could say, hey, actually, that's my money. It was stolen from me and used to pay you. So give it back.
Yeah, we have hundreds of years of tax records.
Yep.
So wouldn't the government then owe the money to the people that they stole from?
Yep.
And if they don't have any money and only assets, wouldn't they have to sell those assets and give that money to the people they stole from?
They don't have any assets because they don't own anything.
So it looks like the money does evaporate, right? Because after they steal from someone and then they create a public park and they build facilities, you're saying that they no longer, you can't inverse it. Basically, they can't sell that facility, take the money back and give it back to the people they stole from.
Somebody built that public park and received the money, right? The money still exists, so track it down if you can and get it back. I have no problem with that. My problem is with the claim that the government owns this park and that they then can sell it to someone. I don't think the government owns any of these things.
Yeah, I don't want to step on your toes with these terms. All I mean is they're in custodianship or they're possessing it currently. I don't mean they own it. I mean that they're the one who are possessing it. They have control over it.
Yep.
That's all I mean. So essentially, if they did tax people, build a park, you're saying that they couldn't sell that park in order to give the money back to the people they stole from because they have no money. They spent all the money into assets. So you're saying that the assets created they become unhomesteaded.
Just as a matter of fact, it's not possible for them to sell the park legally, because to sell something you have to own it first. Right, so it can't happen. Then, what is the root question then? How are we going to pay all these people back? Well, probably not possible to pay all these people back. You could give a good whack. You could certainly pay back a lot of people. Person in chat gave the suggestion of repossessing, Donald Trump's house, Joe Biden's house, all these different places. Yeah, they could be sold off. That would be fine.
Okay. I mean, I don't like that legal system because it sounds like criminals are able to do something.
If you don't like
and then
it,
they don't have to pay
then
back
it
the people
must be
they
false,
hurt.
right? Because you don't like it, so that's clearly a great counter argument.
Well, doesn't that seem to be a flaw
That you don't like
in
it?
the legal system? No, doesn't it seem to be a flaw that criminals can take money from somebody and then not pay it back?
I mean, the legal system doesn't guarantee that nobody will ever get harmed ever, right? What law is describing is saying, hey, it's bad when criminals take all your stuff and then throw it into a volcano. That's bad when they do that, but that doesn't mean that, I have a magic wand where I can suddenly create capital out of thin air and get you completely restituted.
Okay. I mean, it just seems like a flaw in the system because
What's the flaw?
criminals can essentially get away with, they can get away with murder. They can take your money and then they can do whatever they want with it and they don't have to pay it back.
Right, but law
And then they
just
can just disband and then
law just says that what they're doing there is bad, right? Law isn't a magic spell that you can cast and make all the bad people go away.
sure, but this is all very mathematical. You can inverse all of this.
Okay, and go ahead, right?
The money went somewhere.
If you can figure out where your money went, it's still your money, obviously. So take it back. I have no problem with that.
Okay. I mean, I guess we'll just disagree on this. I just think that, since we have tax records, you know specifically how much was stolen from you. And the idea is that the government spent this money because they don't save money, they don't invest in the economy. They just spend it on things that they want. And then when they spend those things, they don't own them, but they are in control of them. And so I guess if they can't sell them and give back the money, that just seems to be a flaw. But that's probably just something we're going to disagree on.
Well, do you have anything else
Also,
to go
can
over?
Oh, I mean, one more topic. If you're cool with it, if you have time, I don't want to make you stay too late.
Sure.
Okay, cool. So I've heard that you are an accelerationist or a collapsitarian. Is that true?
No, I don't know who claimed this. Like what does collapsitarian even consist of?
Oh, okay. I think it's just the idea that uh, speed up the process of destruction of the U.S. government so that we can rebuild as a anarchist society.
I mean, it depends on what specifically you're doing to speed it up.
Okay.
I think
I mean,
it's
it could have.
I think it's
I just
fine to,
probably got a false impression.
yeah. I mean, I think it's fine to make like John Galton quit. I think that's fine. But we would have to go into some specifics.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think the reason I got that idea is because I was watching your and Fabian's debate on open borders, and I think he made a few jokes about like you being collapsitarian, and I guess I just took, I think you laughed at it or something, so I thought you were, but I guess that was just a false assumption. Um, but that being said, I can give you my position on it, and you can tell me if you agree or disagree with this. I actually think that collapsitarianism is not a good idea. While it would be cool to, I guess, speed up and destroy the US government, I think that the destruction would outweigh the benefits of it. So, what I think we should do instead, and actually, you might disagree with me on this, being like a pragmatic anarchist rather than, I guess, what you would be called like a principled anarcho-capitalist, which is the idea that we should consequentially choose the lesser of two evils in order to maintain as little freedom as we have possible, maintain that amount of freedom as much possible, so that we can create competing technologies that allow us to eventually dissociate with the US government. And so I think that there's a few technologies that we've already created and future technologies that we will create in order to create competitions against governments around the world that will allow us to slowly migrate towards those things.
Sure. So I think most of these like plans that people come up with for praxis, they're all entirely non-fundamental. The fundamental here is what philosophy people accept. If people accept a rational philosophy, then you're going to get a rational legal system. If people accept an irrational philosophy, then you're going to get an irrational legal system. And I don't think the level of technology is what the problem is.
Oh, I disagree. Don't you think technology has tremendously shaped how governments and states have interacted with people over the centuries?
I entirely disagree with that. The governments interact with the people, however, they're allowed to, based on what the philosophy of the day is. You could have, massive amounts of technological development bringing us to like this hyper futuristic society, and then Immanuel Kant #2 is born, and then Adolf Hitler #2 follows him, and then you'd have mass genocide across the galaxy or whatever. That's entirely plausible.
Interesting. Okay. I think we do disagree on this because the way I see it is that technology has forever changed the future of the cycle of history. And eventually we will achieve something like a decentralized anarchist system. And the reason for this is four major technologies that I've identified so far. The first one is the internet, which is the decentralization of information. I think that this is the biggest blow to the idea of statism and authoritarianism forever, because we now have the ability to exchange information at high speeds, so now we can keep people more accountable. And this is the base layer of the future of anarchy. And this will forever change the landscape because we will have more accountability.
Hold on, I just want to address that real quick.
And then, yeah, go ahead.
So, you're saying the internet helps you keep people accountable, but then it depends on, well, by which standards are people being held accountable? Are they being held accountable by how charitable they are? How much they're willing to sacrifice? You know, we've heard this over and over and over again. Right now, people are one of the main criticisms people have of Mr. Beast right now is that he's not charitable enough. He should have been more charitable, and he should have been more genuine in his charity. He should have done it not because it would help him, but because it wouldn't help him. So I don't think necessarily keeping people accountable means anarchism at all. It depends on which standards people accept, and that depends on their philosophy, which, this goes back to the philosophical theory of history.
Yeah, but so like if we look at YouTube, which I think is is not entirely free, but it is one of the greatest examples of like a technology of decentralized creators that are all in this gigantic chain, keeping each other accountable, where you've got hundreds of drama channels, you've got hundreds of politics channels, hundreds of economic channels, and they're all like fighting each other. And this is exactly what the free market does. It puts everybody in competition. And I won't disagree that there's going to be a lot of dis and misinformation, but there's also going to be a lot of true information. And I think that with competition in YouTube and across the internet, as the technology gets better, people will get smarter. As people are getting more educated, they will defer more to logic, and then they will see the need for logical cases and arguments to be made. And this is why when we have drama channels that are reporting all these news, they bring up evidence and facts to prove their cases. And what we notice is that these drama YouTube channels and economic YouTube channels and whatever, they seem to rise very high, and they get lots of base of people who are now learning that you need evidence and good argumentation to support the truth. And I think that eventually, if this keeps going, if competition continues, we will get to higher levels of accountability.
So, these things like the internet and, faster, easier ways to communicate, I would be willing to accept that might speed up the adoption of some alternative philosophy into the mainstream. But that philosophy isn't per se correct. One example is Karl Marx was one of the earliest users of the printing press to spread his philosophy. His philosophy was definitely not correct. It took over like wildfire, spread massively thanks to Immanuel Kant paving the way for him, and Hegel after Kant. But this is still the philosophical theory of history. The philosophy is still the fundamental driver of which standard people are using to hold people accountable.
Yeah. But as more people get access to the internet and as the internet evolves, don't you think that these ideas are becoming more widespread, the idea of objectivism, not just like random ideas, like all ideas. Like people are seeing all ideas because there's so much travel of information. And this is how I found out about objectivism. This is how I found out about libertarianism. Dude, I never knew libertarianism existed until like 5 years ago. Like I never knew it before because we had like big channels like Fox News, CNN. Those are like the only news medias I knew about when I was younger. But as I like dove more into YouTube and like started seeing more people talk about it, you find that all these ideas are converging over people. And as the free market does, the best ideas usually win out. Now, there's going to be lots of misinformation in combat, but I think that people are becoming smarter and technology is growing more powerful, and we're recognizing that rationality is necessary. And this is what we do in like debates and stuff. We're understanding better the importance of proper argumentation. Don't you agree with that?
No. So certainly, the invention of the internet has spread up the adoption of things like objectivism, but it's also sped up the adoption of far more sinister ideas. Like, for instance, Ted Kaczynski's philosophy. I don't think it went anywhere until it was brought up on the internet, and then suddenly people are going around as Kaczynskiites, and all sorts of environmentalists now are able to spread their message widely on the internet and convince everyone to hate humans, right? It's not necessarily the case that having a speed up in the spread of information implies that the information will be correct. It could be falsehoods that are being spread.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, but okay, this is interesting. So would you compare the online environment to be similar to a free market economy if it's like uncensored?
I mean, in certain places, in certain ways, that would be similar. There definitely is a lot of market interactions that go on in the internet.
Okay. Well, I'm assuming that you believe that in free markets, competition is what drives efficiency, productivity, and good ideas. So why would this be any different for online?
Well, because being able to communicate faster, does not imply that the correct ideas will take hold. This has been the case for all of history.
Okay. Interesting. What about Bitcoin? You can't possibly say there's anything wrong with Bitcoin.
I don't think there's anything wrong with Bitcoin.
Well, there you go. That's one technology that's literally going to make the Earth, the entire Earth, infinitely better. Not infinitely, but like a lot better.
Sure, if it's adopted as money,
right?
Then that would be a lot better than the current situation.
It will be adopted as money because
not necessarily.
When investors see things that make profit, absolutely, it's been rising for years.
Well, like
it's the greatest performing asset of all time.
Let's say tomorrow morning, every single UN country banned any sort of use of Bitcoin. Right? Do you think that your grandmother is going to want to be using Bitcoins?
No, but it would make Bitcoin more valuable.
Okay, but it wouldn't make it money. Like that would basically kill any chance of it becoming money. Because for it to be money, it would require universal adoption as a medium of exchange, which you're not going to get if you've got to hide that you're using it.
That's true, but the genius of Bitcoin, and we don't have to linger on this for long, but the genius of Bitcoin is that it's such a passive and undangerous concept that if the governments around the world do try to ban it, everyone is going to see this. This is going to be like the biggest story in history if there's like a united government that does this. And all the people will start wondering why this is the case. And we'll start to see that Bitcoin will just become extremely popular because every single government in the world is trying to ban it. And this will probably result in some sort of revolution. But it seems insane and likely impossible that, all the governments in the world would collaborate to ban Bitcoin. And even if they did, it would probably result in some sort of revolution.
So I think you've got a far too high opinion of people. So I can see right now, I could give you a path towards which they could ban Bitcoin and have just about everybody right there along going, yeah, ban this Bitcoin thing. So what they could do is they could say, well, people who like Bitcoin, they're selfish, right? And you don't want to be selfish. They're so selfish. They're destroying the environment just so that they can have the more monies, right? And that's so selfish of them. And they're destroying the environment about this. Instead, you should use our central bank currency, which is, by the way, it's carbon neutral, our one. So you've got to use our one, and you don't want to be a selfish person who's destroying the environment. That would be very easy, and most people would be on board with it.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that sort of happening. I'd like to think that, and maybe I am optimistic, maybe I am overly optimistic, but I'd like to think that many people understand history. Many people have like neo-modern values of like the idea that some amount of freedom is important, and I think people will start to get skeptical and suspicious of this. Now they will turn. I think they will turn the leftists, lots of the leftists, against us. But I'm highly skeptical that conservatives and libertarians would all like go along with this idea of Bitcoin being bad.
Oh, if Donald Trump said that Bitcoin was bad, then I imagine a great deal of the conservatives would follow along with him. They've already made plenty of quotes about how it was actually okay for him to increase gun regulations, that it was okay for him to lock down the whole country, and how it was okay for him to do this, that, and the other thing, right? Like, the conservatives are no more anarchist than the leftists are.
They're a little more anarchist, right? Just a little bit.
I don't see it.
Come on. Like, we can agree that they are very authoritarian, but like they don't know why they believe in freedom. But you have to say that the majority of conservatives like the idea of freedom, even if they don't follow through with it. They at least like the idea.
I think they like it as a bumper sticker, and nothing beyond that. I don't think they've done. I don't think they've done any level of consideration about what that term actually means. They think, well, I like freedom, but you know, we can't have these drug addicts going around. I like freedom, but I mean, we got to leave some room for the government. We got to have a social safety net in here. This is not at all an uncommon position amongst these people.
Yeah. Now, I was talking with someone the other day about how it's funny that conservatives, their true identity is libertarian, but they just don't realize it because they say that they value all the things that they value are really just libertarian values. They value freedom, they value the family, they value independence. All of these things are libertarian values. They're just unrealized libertarians. I think that's what conservatives are.
Again, I
but
think
then they go and they start banning and taxing and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think you have way too high of an opinion of conservatives.
Huh. Must be the people I hang around. Interesting. Okay, but what about free private cities?
What about them?
Don't you think that's going to be a huge deal? They're in construction of creating free private cities, which are going to start competing with governments.
Sure, if you could get a free private city up, then that would be a good thing. But again, this is not a fundamental.
That's the direction we're headed in.
Right, but if the philosophy becomes more totalitarian, which that's the direction the philosophy is going in, then it's not very hard to imagine a government going, well, these selfish people in this big city, we'll call it Mulligan's Valley, right? These selfish people, they want to have all this wealth for themselves, but you know, we've got a war with China brewing, and we got to prepare for this war with China that's brewing, and you know, they're also destroying the environment in there, and they're so selfish, and we got to stop this selfishness that they've got. So we're gonna invade them and stop all this. And by the way, they're all drug dealers in there, and there are all these horrible things going on in there. I cannot. I don't find that hard to imagine one bit.
Damn. Okay, interesting. I mean, maybe it is optimistic. I don't think it is because I know a lot of people are bad, but I think generally the vast majority of people just want to live a simple, peaceful life. I don't think the vast majority of people are bad. I think the vast majority of people just want to live a simple, easy life, and then they'll get angry in politics, but they won't actually act out their, their vitriolic feelings on it.
Well, I
I mean,
think
what do you think about that?
I think the vast majority of people, if the government tells them that they're some evil, selfish person who they've got to report on, they'll report on it in a second. So the conservatives, if they say, oh, there's a drug dealer, they'll report on that in an instant. If you've got some sort of a leftist of some sorts, or an immigrant, that's the big one for the conservatives. It's like, oh, or even here's another one, right? You see these OnlyFans models online who don't report their taxes, and there'll be a bunch of rightists in the comments like atting the IRS saying, hey, this person hasn't reported on their taxes yet. Most people, vast majority of people, will march right along, goose step right along with the government, and kill you if that's what if they've deemed you to be one of those undeserving people.
Okay. I mean, this is interesting. Like, I don't know if you've heard any of Jordan Peterson's talks, but one of his most famous talks is this idea that don't be too sure that you wouldn't be part of the regime, in Nazi Germany. And it's this idea that people really do go with the flow. People they're what they're simple animals that they just sort of listen to the directions. And if it's going to be dangerous or it's going to harm them, they're just going to go with everyone else. But doesn't it seem like there's been a shift, like in the last few decades, where people are getting smarter? Like,
well, like
sure, there's some people who are just simple-minded.
Well, it's like I remember, long time ago, back in the old days of 2020, when just about every government on Earth said, you know what, nobody's allowed to go outside anymore. You're all arrested inside of your homes, and these ordinary, everyday people. They were reporting on their neighbors, saying, hey, my neighbors, they had a gathering of more than 3 people. You got to get in there and arrest them. Right? Or this gym down the road, they didn't close for business, so you got to get in there and arrest them. Like, these were ordinary, everyday people, not that long ago, who were reporting on their neighbors because the government said so.
Yeah. And also, if you think about how the conservatives also deny that Trump was the initiator of the lockdowns, I guess that does make it a little bit worse. But I mean, that's not on the same level as the Soviet Union, right? That's not on the same level. Like, obviously that's bad, but like, people would have made a hard break if they started doing worse things than that. Don't you think?
Well, I mean, we're not that far off from the Soviet Union. All the philosophy is already there, ripe for it. It's the philosophy has to be changed, and that's why I do what I do, because I'm trying to change the philosophy, because that is the fundamental.
Okay, but don't you have hope for the future? I mean, the way I see it is that I never learned about libertarianism until the rise of like YouTube and stuff. So the way I see this is that good ideas are going to become more popular, very incrementally, albeit, but very slowly they will start to get more popular. I never knew what libertarian was, like I said, before YouTube, but like as we keep going, as media and information becomes more decentralized, more people are going to hear good ideas. And at some point, we'll be able to create like some colony or something. What is it? What state is it? The Freedom Project?
New Hampshire Free State Project.
Yeah, we're gonna get more stuff. By the way, are you moving there?
Yeah,
I heard that.
I mean,
oh, that's awesome. Nice, dude.
I don't want it to sound
but
like
stuff like that's gonna happen.
I don't want it to sound like I'm pessimistic. I'm definitely not pessimistic. I think it's there's definitely a path towards bringing about a more freedom-oriented philosophy. I just think the things that you mention, they are all downstream of changing the philosophy. Changing the philosophy is the fundamental part. And that's why we got to bring about anarchist objectivism as being the mainstream philosophy.
I actually 100% agree with you. And that's the reason why I think the Libertarian party is kind of a dumb idea, because we're never going to win any elections. What I think we should do is take all those resources and money and just spend it on libertarian education. And just like the leftists did, instead of having a political party, I think we should literally just put all our money into creating, libertarian institutions and libertarian marketing that spread out these ideas, because the Libertarian Party is kind of a failure. So we should just put that all into research, development, and education.
Well, I think being on the presidential ticket is a potential good way to spread the message, though. Like, I mean, Ron Paul did that. He wasn't on the presidential ticket, but, he ran.
Yeah, but it's like you said, the philosophy comes first.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I am hopeful for the future. I don't know if it'll happen in our lifetime, but I think things definitely will get better.
Sure. Yeah. Damn. It was great talking to you.
Yeah, that was an awesome conversation, man. I mean, yeah, I appreciate like everything you told me. Good conversation. Glad we were able to deal with all those things. By the way, can I get into your server?
Sure.
I don't know how to get into your server.
I'll do
okay, cool.
Discussion in there after the debate. I'll post it in the
Dope.
Fucking fly keeps flying
Actually,
around me.
would you mind if I joined in? I want to.
Sure.
I want to hear all these people roast me. But yeah, I want to get into your server. I like you. You're a smart dude. If you're cool with, I want to hang around with more libertarians. I want to understand the philosophy better, and I want to build a community of libertarian like-minded people. So hopefully you're cool with me. I'm super cool with you. I like the content you make.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, I'll see you in the. I'll probably just go into the general VC. I'll see you in a bit.
Dope. Okay, I'll see you in there, man.
All right, so Discord link is in the chat. I'm just gonna be right back. Oop. Yeah, do you like my BRB screen here? See, a lot of investment went into this one.
Moral support, because I don't see any evidence. I don't see any evidence for moral objectivism as being true. That was my question.
Yeah, sort of. I could go over again. My claim there was that your your position that, well, there isn't any evidence that you can go from is to ought, that claim itself is an arbitrary claim. Just as it's an arbitrary claim for me to say, well, there's no evidence that you can go from the laws of physics into predicting what the weather will be tomorrow. Right? I would have to provide some evidence there. You'd have to provide some evidence that you couldn't go from is to ought.
Exactly, which I don't understand at all. And that's why you send me a good whatever article or something.
Well, it's your claim though.
The claim is the claim is me asking a question of what is the justification. So, like, is that really a claim?
Are you claiming that you can't go from is to ought?
Again, I would just switch it around. Instead of claiming how do you I wouldn't claim that there is no way to breach the is-ought gap. I would ask, what is the evidence for bridging the is-ought gap? That's how it went.
Right. I think he provided some evidence for it, using his argument on how he derived NAP.
Yeah, which I didn't understand. So he's going to send me something to read.
Do you understand like the ethical justification, like without like it being moral? Because I think you have like those two things as separate, right?
Well, what do you see the difference as?
Well, I think the difference is more like semantic, or like, I'd say moral is more something you'd like use in your personal life, like helping like a kitten or something, that's like moral or something like that, right? And ethical is just like, well, as a Zul, I guess would say, just true, if you like take all the other things that you could do in the situation, which one is the one that is not like incoherent essentially, or like, doesn't create contradictions.
Right, that's true. My problem is just with moral objectivism, which, Zulu basically said that there is a way to, I forget what exactly he said, but I think he said that there is a way to breach the is-ought gap, which I just don't understand.
Yes, I think the... Oh, sorry, you go ahead.
What's your evidence that the gap exists in the first place?
It's not a matter of me saying the gap doesn't exist. It's a matter of me not understanding how to cross the gap.
But the gap doesn't exist. So what is your evidence that there's a such gap in the first place? I'm denying the existence of the gap.
So the evidence would be something like this. And I asked Zulu the same question, but essentially I would say, why ought I live? It's a very simple question, but the answer is not so simple. Now, we know that people do have values, and we know that people chase their values, but we don't know why people should chase their values.
Well, it's very simple. The ought comes from the is. They're not separate in the first place. Why ought you live? Because living is the thing that makes values possible. That's how simple it is. There's nothing you can change about that situation. That is the is. And since living makes values possible, it is a value, and then you ought to follow certain moral codes so you can follow the is. And there's nothing you can do to change the is. Is ought follows the is. The dichotomy actually that never existed in the first place. Hume was being wrong.
I don't see that as being self-evident, though, as you should live so that you can, I forget what you said, so that you can chase your values. You should live so that you can chase your values.
Yeah, it's not an axiom, right? I already justified that. I don't claim that it's an axiom, but living is a value because it's the thing that makes values possible. If not for life, we wouldn't have the concept of values in the first place. Therefore, it's the ultimate standard of value. So,
right, but he could deny the value of life in particular, and then he could just commit suicide, and that would be
doesn't it seem kind of circular how you say that you live in order to achieve your values, and you should live in order to achieve your values? Like,
no, you don't live. I didn't say you live in order to achieve values. I said value presupposes life. Those are two different sentences. You
Value
have
presupposes life.
yes. Life makes
I
value
suppose
possible,
you
and
can't value
there's
death.
nothing you can do to change this fact. That is the is, right? There's nothing you can change the fact that life value presupposes life. Presupposes life.
So I'll grant you that.
You, if you're a rational being, there is the rational humans cannot deny this fact. Reality is independent of your mind. There's nothing you can deny this. So if I'm not going to deny reality, and if value indeed presupposes life, then I have to look into, okay, life is the ultimate standard of value. So how do I act according to life? According to living, according to flourishment, optimizing living. Now this brings the ought. Is and out come from the same reality. They don't exist in separate realities. Living requires action, and action requires a standard of value. Humans ought to pursue values that sustain and enhance their lives. Therefore, by this way, we can prove that the gap between is and ought never existed in the first place.
Right, but it sounds a little bit like you're presupposing that I ought to value. What if,
Yes,
like, why
there
should I
is.
value?
There's still a gap in that reasoning.
So you outvalue human life because there's no other reality because of the primacy of existence. You cannot change reality. Your consciousness doesn't change reality. Reality, as I said, exists independent of your mind. And the fact that life being the ultimate value, and without life, the concept of value would be meaningless. This exists independently of your consciousness.
Yes, exactly. I think the best way to understand this is that you can't value death because, again, value presupposes life. So if you value death, you are in a contradiction, right? You're going to attempt to optimize your life such that you die. That is
basically
not good.
Ought is derived from the objective requirements of human life.
Okay, so you're saying that in order to value, you need to be alive. And so because you are alive, you can't value death?
You can choose to value death, but that will be a wrong choosing. You will be wrong.
Wait. What do you mean it'll be a wrong choosing? Because if we agree that man acts purposefully and that man always acts to his strongest preference, how can it be wrong that him choosing death was the thing that he valued?
That's psychological. It's possible for people to value something incorrect. But what we're talking about is on a philosophical level, right? When you try to justify this, you can't justify valuing death because in order to value death, you must also value being alive. And this is a contradiction. You can't value both of these things at once. It is A and not A. And I think, everyone gets that.
Wait, wouldn't you say the value is psychological and not philosophical?
No. There's a confusion in here, which I do understand the confusion of. Men do act purposefully. I can also purposefully decide to, genocide the Jews or something like that. This doesn't mean my purposeful action is good. So yes, humans take purposeful actions for an end. This is a psychological statement of how humans act like. But there's also a statement of how humans should act like. So my purposeful action should be rational actions because life is the ultimate standard of value because I want to follow the actions that requires a standard of value. So I should probably select better purposeful actions than murdering the Jews or something.
Can I take a swing at the is-ought thing real quick? Would you guys mind that? Okay.
Hit it with that.
All right, thank you. So as far as I understand it, the ought in the is-ought is a prescriptive statement and the is a descriptive statement. So when someone invokes the is-ought dichotomy, it's self-contradictory because when someone asserts that you can't get an ought from an is, they're implicitly making an ought statement themselves because they're saying that you ought not to derive an ought from an is, which is inherently self-contradictory. And I think that logical arguments are preferable to illogical arguments. And then the other idea I have about it, and sorry for steamrolling through, I just wanted to get the thought out, but I did hear some pushback. And then the other thing is, I think it can be overcome by if-then statements, and this kind of gets past the, in order to value anything, you have to be alive first thing, because then the obvious rebuttal is, will monks light themselves on fire? So if you want to be healthy, which is a somewhat objective standard health, then you can't be obese. Or if you want to say true things about, reality, then you ought to use the scientific method, or, if then. So what do you guys think of that?
I disagree with it entirely. I think there's a conflation between the use value of a particular method and an actual prescriptive statement. So by performing an action, I'm not presupposing that I ought to do that action. That's a conflation between the utility I'm taking from that action and a normative statement regarding that.
I had my microphone now. I'd like to speak on this now because I finally have my microphone. I was going to speak on it earlier, but I guess in relation to something like a question of, why ought I value? Here's the thing. All you can do is value. The question for man, since man is constantly engaging in purposeful action due to his faculty of reason not being automatic, he engages in constant purposeful or intended behavior. Man simply cannot choose just to not act. The question is not to act or not. The question is how to act. It is the question of ought I do this or ought I do that? Because it's, of course, to try to purposefully not act is a complete contradiction. Man's nature, is about that he has to constantly engage in purposeful, intended behavior. When you are acting, you intended on that behavior. You're presupposing that you should act. So the question here is, how should man act? That is the question that ethics is describing. What are the proper values for man? And this comes from the fact that man has an objective nature. If man's nature were simply arbitrary, then sure, ethics would be arbitrary. But man has an objective methodology of reason. And because of that, man has an objective methodology of reason. We must have a methodology. That's my point. Is if man's reason is objective, then the methodology for reason too is objective. Where is this arbitrary subjectivity coming from? An apple let falls from a tree. We observe this to be in the nature of an apple. If we have hydrogen and oxygen, we put them together, it's called water. This is in the nature of hydrogen and oxygen and water. Why cavil at the concept of nature? Man's nature, too, is objective. His reason is objective. The point is, because man's reason is objective, he has objective criteria for his life. Many things he has to have to survive, such as food, clothing, water. The main point is that we must have a methodology for reason. Man is constantly engaging in all of this purposeful behavior because that's all he can do. It's not to act or not, it's to do this or to do that. And because of that, we must have a methodology, a logic to know if we should do this or to do that. Anyway, I'll shut up now.
Yes. So I want to briefly respond to Kairos. When you said, I feel like your refutation of the Hube's guillotine is a bit flawed, because what you said was, when they say you cannot get an is from an ought, they're making a prescriptive statement. That's not necessarily true. They could be simply saying that it is not true that you can get an ought from an is, right? That's simply that could be making a descriptive statement.
That is itself an epistemic norm. They're saying you should only believe in these certain things, right? They're not making a moral claim there, but they still are using a shoe.
That's not even necessarily true. They don't even have to be saying that you should believe in things. They might just be saying this is a true statement in, right. I don't know. They might not necessarily be saying that anyone else should believe it.
I don't understand what the distinction between me saying the sky is blue right now and me saying you should believe that the sky is blue right now? Like, what is the actual distinction between those two claims?
Well, the distinction is that the second claim involves like what other people should believe, and the first claim is merely a statement of fact, right? Like there's clearly a difference.
Right, but what is it? What does it actually mean to state a fact if not saying, hey, that your cognitive fact? Obviously, you're not saying this explicitly, but like this is the whole science of epistemology. It's telling you how you should operate your mind, in order to attain truth, in order to attain knowledge, right?
Right. Yeah. But like, any statement, it could just be, it is the case that the sky is blue. And,
right, and I don't think that claim
it's
is
not
any
necessarily
different.
true that people should believe that.
I don't think that the claim that the sky is blue.
Sorry, my oven is beeping.
All right. Yeah, I don't think there is any distinction from saying the sky is blue to saying you should believe that the sky is blue, right? Because when I'm saying the sky is blue, I'm relying on a certain epistemology, which all ends up in, hey, the epistemology that I think is correct says that you should believe this thing.
I mean,
That's not necessarily the case.
That presupposes the norm
if that isn't the case, if these are completely distinct
implies
claims,
that you believe other people should believe it.
Well, if these are completely distinct claims, could I simultaneously say, hey, the sky is blue and you shouldn't believe that the sky is blue? Would you think that that person is making any sense?
It would be a contradiction, but it would be
well, it's a contradiction.
For someone to say that
okay.
and believe that. Just like it's possible for someone to value death.
If that's a contradiction, for me to claim the sky is blue and you shouldn't believe the sky is blue, doesn't that imply that they're the same claim? It would be A and non-A, which implies that they're both A, right?
They're not the same claim. One is a descriptive statement about the nature of something, while the other is a statement about the obligations.
What action you should take.
Yes, what action you ought to take. Now,
sure,
when you say something like the sky is blue, or so you're not necessarily presupposing
sure.
you ought to believe the sky is blue or anything. It's a value-free descriptive statement.
But, okay, so you point to a difference there. They're pointing at different parts of this, right? But what Chronic accepted there is that I can't simultaneously, whilst remaining non-contradictory, point to you shouldn't believe the sky is blue and point to the sky is blue. I can't point to those at the same time without being in contradiction. So therefore, could Hume...
I might walk that back, actually, now that I think about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then why do you walk that back? How could I be consistent in saying the sky is blue and you shouldn't believe that the sky is blue?
Different types of...
You wouldn't consider that at all?
They're two different statements. Like...
No. It's not inconsistent.
Okay, so when I claim the sky is blue, am I using some sort of epistemology when I say the sky is blue?
Yes, you're claiming something about facts, about reality.
Okay.
It doesn't necessarily presuppose any normative statement.
But what does epistemology tell man, if not how he should operate his mind in order to obtain knowledge? What does epistemology say, if not any sort of should? If epistemology doesn't give you any norms, what is it actually claiming?
So there is a distinction here. There's a distinction here because the sky is blue is a fact. You should believe the sky is blue is an epistemic norm, and those are different things. Like how you come to facts, how you should come to facts is epistemology, but the facts themselves are not epistemology.
Right. But
so the fact that the sky is blue is not epistemology on its own.
But all I'm trying to establish here, for now, the second step is to show that these can't point in different directions. But for right now, when I'm making the claim, the sky is blue, I am using an epistemology there, right? I think we agreed on that. And what would it mean to have an epistemology which doesn't give you norms, which doesn't say you should believe in true things? Could you have an epistemology that says you should not believe in true things?
Epistemology is what allows you to obtain knowledge. It shows you what's required to have knowledge. It's not telling you if you're obligated to use this epistemology.
I'm not saying obligated. Like that's getting up into morality. I'm not making the moral claim here, right? But it is still a norm. It's saying these are the things you should do for knowledge.
Couldn't you phrase it as, if you want to be accurate, consistent, and valid, then you should use the most accurate and consistent epistemology. So if I want to be accurate in my truth claims, then I shouldn't use tea leaf reading or animal entrails. I should use something like the scientific method if I want to be accurate.
The scientific method relies on epistemology.
Knowledge is the end. Epistemology is simply the means. There's no normativity necessitated. There's no. You don't need to presuppose that you ought to go about this.
If there is no normativity in epistemology, it can't give you any norms. It can't say this behavior is proper, this behavior is improper. Specifically related to knowledge, it can't say this method is proper, this method is improper. What you have there is not an epistemology.
I don't see why it's not an epistemology.
Because epistemology is supposed to tell you the proper methods to gain knowledge.
Yeah, it shows you the conditions. It shows you what was required for you to obtain knowledge. Yes, but it's not giving you any prescriptive statements about how you ought to go about. Now,
what does it mean to describe the conditions required to obtain knowledge without also saying what the proper method for gaining knowledge is?
You can say proper method. Yeah, you could say this is these are the rules. Okay, you should go about. But you're saying you should in a different sense. You're not using.
I agree that it's not a moral
in a normative.
I agree it's nothing to do with ethics yet, but it is still an ought claim. Right? And I think it's arbitrary of Hume to say, well, okay, epistemic oughts are fine, just not moral oughts.
Well, it's two different senses of the word ought. It's not. With your claim epistemic norms, they're not, as you said, they're not in the realm of ethics. They don't tell us anything about ethics.
Well, okay, I think I see what Zulu's trying to say here. Where he's saying,
right? To be clear, I'm definitely claiming that these are epistemic norms. I agree with that, right? That this isn't giving you an ethic yet, but it is still an ought claim, right? Hume's argument is supposed to give us an argument against any sort of ought claim. Right? How does he particularize to just moral oughts whilst allowing epistemic oughts?
Isn't it just the normative? Isn't just the normative ought that he's claiming against? Isn't that all that is?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
So, like, isn't Hume just arguing against the normative ought? Like, obviously, he wouldn't be against. If you want to run 100 meters the fastest, you need to train.
If we would take,
I think we're
that's epistemic ought.
I think we're confused. Like, an epistemic ought has some similar character to a moral ought that makes them both oughts, right? And so I'm actually curious if this is even like if this is a dichotomy here. Like, what is actually supposed to be the distinction between an epistemic ought and a moral ought?
Well, I suppose I could jump in with that. Hold on.
Go, Zulu.
I think the only distinction I can see between those two things is what the end goal is in Divinity's terms here. Right?
Exactly.
Is the goal to live the good life or to get knowledge? But living the good life requires knowledge, of course. So I don't think they're like difference of kind here.
Yeah, that's the point, though. That's the thing, is that Hume's attack is an attack on normativity. It's not an attack on moral norms. And so Zulu's right. It is it is inconsistent to accept epistemic norms, but the argument be against like norms as such. It's like drawing a distinction between like food norms and sleep norms, right? It's like, yeah, well, obviously in one case the goal might be sleeping, in one case the goal might be getting food, but there's still, you know, norms, and that's what the similarity is. So you can't like attack moral norms without also attacking in some way epistemic norms if you're attacking them on the grounds that they're norms and not on the grounds of what the goal is.
Interesting. By the way, Divinity, are you the Divinity, like the YouTuber?
YouTuber? I've never been referred to as a YouTuber. I have a YouTube, but I don't know. You're probably not talking about me.
Wait, have you debated synth before?
Yeah, never mind. That's me.
Okay, dude, I want to talk with you sometime.
Yeah,
In your debates, they're cool.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, if you click his profile, he has his YouTube link there, so you can stalk him on the internet.
That's right. But yeah, as it pertains to the is epistemology normative? So there is a way in which you can say it can be non-normative, but you would just have a radically different approach than what what like objectivists do. Like you could say, for example, that descriptively certain conditions have to obtain for you to have knowledge or for you to be justified, but you could not say that you should do anything, just that if you have that goal you should. But I mean the whole given the goal thing, that is a norm, so that like it doesn't make sense really to say it's non-normative, because epistemology is
I'm interested in hearing your answer to this question. Why ought I live?
Oh yeah, beautiful. When you ask why there, let's conceptually reduce evaluative concepts. Like, what is by why there? At least from what I understand, you're asking for like a motivation, right? It seems like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
motivation.
Exactly, and so evaluative language, like why, reduces down to motivation, and so the reasons for why you should live is to be happy. Or I won't say happy because that's loaded, but to have positive emotional experiences. It's the reason you should live. And now if you ask
values.
Now if you ask, well, why should I? Well, if you well, how do I know that you should live to be happy or something like that?
Yeah.
Well, it's because the concept of like evaluative concepts refer to those things. Like if you're essentially asking like, well, why should I pursue positive motives? It's like the concept of why presupposes positive motive. When you ask why, you're asking for a positive motive.
Right.
Unless you're not doing that, which I don't know if you're doing. Well,
like,
it's not circular. Like
pursue my preferences, right?
Well, I don't accept that you should pursue your preferences per se, because your preferences can lead to negative emotional experiences.
So then, aren't you presupposing that you are pursuing pleasure, like you ought to pursue pleasure on a broad scale, meaning satisfaction, wisdom?
Well, I don't want to. Yeah. So let's clarify that the fundamental concept evaluatively are positive emotional experiences. Now, you have more complex emotional mechanisms that rely on your free will and the way you live your life, and so desires and wants and higher level goals, like those things are all they can be good for you, but they have to be made consistent with the fundamental. So, I mean, I'm not. Sorry, your question was I presupposing something?
Yeah. So when I asked the question, why should I live? It seems like you said you should live to live a good life. But I guess that kind of just backs up the question to why should you live a good life?
Well, when you say why there, like, what are you like that question doesn't really make sense. Like, well,
exactly. That's you nailed it. Okay. You nailed it. That's exactly what I'm asking, because the question why is such a hard question to answer, because we don't even necessarily we can't even possibly comprehend what we're asking when we ask the question why.
Oh, no. That's not why I'm saying it's confused. I'm not saying it's because the question doesn't make sense. Like, I don't understand what it means. I'm saying that the reason you're asking the questions don't exist. The question's very meaningful. Like, when you say, why should you live? Well, you're asking for a motivation to live. So you should live for positive emotional experiences. That's what motivations are. Now, if you're asking, why should I live for positive motivational experiences? That doesn't make sense because the concept of asking for a reason is asking for a positive emotional experience. It's like asking, if you want a positive emotional experience, why should you pursue emotional experiences? It's like, what? That's like, it's because it's emotional experience.
But isn't that pleasure?
Yeah, it is pleasure. Well, pleasure is a type of it. I just like to say positive emotional experiences because sometimes you can use pleasure to specifically refer to like physical positive experiences as opposed to like, grand conceptual ones.
I think happiness was the term.
Yeah, well, I like to be edgy and talk like a utilitarian.
I used in the debate. So like happiness is in non-contradictory joy.
Yeah, that's a type of positive experience, but it's not like pleasure per se.
But so I guess, do you understand where I'm getting at? Where it almost falls into a type of infinite regress, where when you ask for why should I live for pleasure, it seems like the answer is you should live for pleasure. Well, you'll go back to, I don't know, whatever your answer was, but it seems to go back infinitely. The thing with is there's a hard stop. With
the problem.
Logic, there's a hard stop, but there's not that with ought.
The problem is that you're trying to divorce the question from your epistemic standpoint. Okay? So the meanings of the question, like the meaning of the question, why should I X, Y, Z? Those meanings have reducible origins, right? The concept of why and should and reason, all of those evaluative concepts originate in your experiencing of pleasure and pain. And so it isn't infinitely regressive. It's just the fact that whenever you ask why live for positive emotional experiences, it's like a category error to ask for that. The concept of why presupposes, positive emotional experiences, not the other way around.
If I can jump in, it might be easier to answer it with like a negative statement, like it's because you haven't like killed yourself essentially. Because, well, yeah, that's it essentially.
Well, I mean, I'm not trying to say whether or not. So there's like, you're concerned right now with like the theory. You're not necessarily concerned with like, do people choose to live good lives? I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, whenever you ask for like a reason, you're asking for a motivation, and a motivation, all there is, like motivations are positive emotional experiences. Take for instance, the indestructible robot example, right? Take that example, but then assume that there's no emotions, right? Why should the robot do anything? It shouldn't. Like, there's no motivation for it to do anything. Now, if you introduce hedonic aspects of its experience, like pleasure and pain, but there are reasons to do things. And so, I mean, that's not infinitely regressive, right? It reduces in the fact of you experiencing, positive experiences. I'm actually, if you're interested, by the way, if you're interested, I'm talking to, there's this objectivist, his name is Dr. Dan Norton. And I'm talking with him tomorrow on this topic if you want to watch that video.
Make sure I'll
do that one. Sounds dope.
I've seen some of Dan's videos. He seems more reasonable than the Randroids.
Yeah, probably.
Divinity, can I ask you something?
Yeah, what's up?
Okay, so you said that the goal of life is to have positive human experiences, correct?
Of a human life, yeah.
Yeah, positive human life. So, I jumped in here late. I don't really fully know the context of this, but like, let's say I derive really positive experiences from like beating the crap out of people. Like, I absolutely have gained total positive experience from just killing people. Why should I not live that out?
Yeah, so part of understanding positive experiences as a motivation is understanding the continued pursuit of positive experiences. And so whenever you're constructing a standard for what to pursue, you have to understand the impacts of your pursuit long range, because you might experiencing something super pleasurable now, but it might paralyze you from being able to pursue more things in the future. So The reason, so given that we understand that our action has to be planned long range, trying to pursue positive experiences social second-handedly by violating the rights of people and not relying on producing your own things with reality, that kind of policy isn't sustainable long range. So I shouldn't do it.
Okay, so you and I basically have the same view on that then.
Yeah, it's the normal objectivist view.
I'm not the normal objectivist, but okay.
No, I know, but I'm saying that view is the objectivist view.
Well, yeah, I know. I've been around you guys long enough to know that.
Yeah. What was the conversation raised in though? Like the question about epistemology and norms?
It was in reference to companions and guilt, because Anarcheosis was using Hume's guillotine basically as like, well, he clearly can't get from is to ought, and so the attack was that, hey, that attack doesn't work. Hume's guillotine doesn't work, so therefore you're left with an arbitrary claim that there is some sort of gap here from is to ought, and you've got to show that you can't get from is to ought.
Right. Oh, okay. But so you ran companions and guilt?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I object to companions and guilt in the way that it's normally presented, but I'd agree with the reformulation. Categorical reasons don't exist, but hypothetical ones do. So, I mean, I'd grant that.
When you say categorical reason, what do you mean? I know what a categorical imperative is, but what's a categorical reason?
Yeah. So, okay, think about it like this. If I have an instrumental reason or like a hypothetical reason, the reason there is just the motivation for pursuing such and such. So, if I have a goal, that goal serves as the reason to do something for the means, right? A categorical reason is essentially like the equivalent of like the categorical comparative distinction from a hypothetical imperative. So it's supposed to be a thing which motivates you to perform an action, but has no instrumental relationship to the thing being performed. The problem with that, obviously, is that that's an anti-concept, right? Like, what does it even mean to, have a reason to do something independent of a goal, or independent of a standard or something? That doesn't make any sense. So I would agree with companions and guilt, but like an objectivist shift on it. So it's like, if there are reasons for belief, not necessarily categorical, but if there are reasons at all.
What is this companions and guilt, by the way?
It's this argument to explain how if you deny, moral norms, you'd also be committed to denying epistemic norms. So the argument goes as this, like, if there are epistemic reasons for belief, then there are moral reasons for action. And the premise one justification is that epistemic norms and moral norms are like relevantly similar.
Well, no, epistemic norms are not ought claims. So.
They are ought claims.
No, what Hume's guillotine is saying is that you cannot derive a prescriptive conclusion from purely descriptive premises.
What do you mean by derive there? Like, do you mean deduce?
Deduce, yes.
Well, yeah, I'd agree with that. Well, actually, I probably wouldn't agree with that. I mean, so the first thing is, I think Hume is begging the question, why would I accept that there's a dichotomy between facts and values?
Because one is value free and the other is not.
That's just presupposing the division. Like, what's the problem in taking facts to be or taking values to be a certain species of fact?
Well, I think the big distinction here is we know that we have motivations, and we know that we have values, and we know that we chase those values, but we don't know why we chase those values. Sorry,
well, we know why,
but we don't know why we should chase those values. Sorry.
But that kind of demand to ask why we should chase values is inverting the conceptual hierarchy. Should evaluative language is after motivation. So to ask why motivate, like to ask, well, why be motivated by motivations? That doesn't make sense. The concept of why presupposes motive. asking
if you're saying motivations presuppose ought claims, then I don't disagree.
No,
other way. Ought claims presuppose motivations.
Like here's like the way that you reduce the fact value dichotomy. When I ask why I should do something, I'm asking for a motivation. I'm asking someone to identify the fact that something is motivated. There's not a dichotomy between fact and value. Values are a species of fact. And Peikoff has an essay talking about this. If you're interested.
What's it called?
Fact and value.
Nice.
Yeah. He kind of gibberates in it a little bit, but he has good points in it. But it's essentially what I'm talking about, that evaluative language is just a certain species of fact. And it has to do with the relationship that consciousness has to reality, and specifically volition.
That's definitely interesting.
But yeah, that's the problem with Hume's argument, or when you say, well, there are no epistemic oughts. Like, what do you mean by ought there? Because if by ought you mean like you should believe such and such, is that what you mean?
When I hear an epistemic ought, what I think of is, in order to win the race, you need to train every single day for months. That's what I hear as an epistemic ought.
Is that because
is there a distinction between the statement "the sky is blue" and "you ought to believe the sky is blue"?
Yeah, there's a distinction.
There's a strong distinction.
Yeah, one has to deal with the fact of the sky being blue, and one has to deal with the facts about human cognition and what they would have to obtain to believe that.
But then what we got into was, well, could I coherently claim at the same time? Like, so they're pointing at different parts of this, I see. But could I point at the same time at, you shouldn't believe that the sky is blue and that the sky is blue? Like, I don't think I can point in these two different directions at once without being in contradiction.
Or to frame this logically, you could say that the sky is blue implies you should believe the sky is blue. And if the former is true, then the latter is also going to be true.
Well, let's try to reduce the concepts again. Like, so when it comes to an epistemic ought, I think the problem here is we're treating thought process as if it's not a type of action, right? So like people understand moral norms as like, I'm controlling my actions, such and such. But you do that with your mind too, in the way that you conduct your mind's thought process. And so the question can be asked about the way you think. So, in what way should I think? And then you have to specify the goal, right? And so, that's what epistemology does. So whenever someone says, it might be true that you believe something, and I agree that it doesn't necessarily imply an epistemic ought. But to say that epistemology exists independent of epistemic oughts is wrong.
Right, and then I think that I think that's even enough for me to demonstrate my claim that you can't point in these two different directions, because if I'm making the claim the sky is blue, then I must be relying on some prior epistemology there. Like, I don't think I can separate that from epistemology, and I don't think you can separate epistemology from epistemic norms.
Mm-hmm.
But do you need to value truth in order to say that thing that you're saying? You can't make a distinction between the sky is blue and the sky ought to be blue.
Well, I agree with the distinction you pointed out, I agree with the distinction Chronic originally got to, that they're pointing at different parts, but I think those are just different parts of the same thing. It's like how the law of identity is different to the existence axiom. I think they're different in a similar way.
Right, but they can imply, there is an implication there, right? Like,
yeah, I think it's an if and only if. I think the sky is blue if and only if you should believe that the sky is blue.
Exactly.
I might accept that. I don't know. Maybe. But yeah, here's the way I understand the relationship of norms to epistemology. So of course epistemology starts out, I guess. Actually, I can't even say that. The thing about philosophy is that it's it's an integrated whole. So like think about it like this. Whenever you're constructing an epistemology, like whenever you're trying to weigh them against each other, you're using epistemic norms. So I mean, it doesn't really make sense to say that epistemic norms can be divorced from epistemology.
Are you just saying that there's a motivation to seek knowledge and that's the underlying norm?
Oh yeah, so this
make evaluation on the right epistemology. Yeah, you're gonna need an ought.
Epistemology.
So yeah, I was saying
epistemic norms
that.
Yeah, I think you can reframe any normative system as like as something prudential on the grounds that you could say, if you want to know true things, then do X, right? And that's your epistemology. And then for ethics, it's if you want to be good, then do X, right?
Right. And so, like, here's this subject in philosophy. I was getting at it inside chat. It's called meta normativity. So a lot of people will divorce. They will just completely conceptually isolate moral norms from epistemic norms. But let's understand moral norms, right? Like, why should you do anything such and such? It's for positive emotional experiences. That same kind of normative, source is the same for epistemic thoughts too. The reason, this is my view. This is never said in objectivism. It might be implied, but my view is that the reason why you should follow epistemic norms is to live a happy life. I don't really know how. Take a calculator, right? Calculators don't have epistemic. I don't see the reason calculators should follow epistemic norms, unless they had something at stake there. So
calculators are not actors. They can't value things.
Yeah, it's true.
But like, I think the easy through line here is like, if you don't have valid epistemic norms, you can't draw valid relationships about things in reality. And if you can't do that, you can't make predictions about how your actions will turn out, and therefore you can't have a coherent plan of action to get to things which make you happy. So you can't act in a way that makes
Truth is so in all theories of ethics, this is the thing. In all theories of ethics, truth is indispensable, right? Because achieving whatever goal it is requires understanding the nature of the world, how to achieve it. So like knowledge and truth are indispensable, which then implies that conducting your mind in a certain way to know the truth is also indispensable. And that's the reasoning behind epistemic oughts. It's why subjectivists can't get around it either. Subjectivists still have to reconcile with reality in order to achieve their goals. So there are epistemic noughts. There are oughts.
I've been labeled as a subjectivist who brands himself with a different label.
Okay. What do you mean?
Kill him.
because I can't get a binding ought out of
Fact.
Well, empirical data.
What do you mean by like a binding ought? I don't
like a Kantian like.
Yeah, you don't. Why would you want something like that? That concept doesn't.
That was like the goalpost he set up, which was like, that's the kind of ought that I'm looking for.
Don't look for that.
Because I can always disobey your morality, and you can't stop me.
It's like looking for a contradiction. Like it's just like there's no reason to do that. Like
I guess like the question there, like find a non-conditional ought, right?
Yeah.
And I guess
right.
It's not really possible. Like even in the case of life as the ultimate standard of value, right? Like the condition there is that you're alive, right? And that you you have values, right? And then the thing, like if you don't value life,
it's actually not just living.
Value.
It's not just living.
Die.
It's not just living, because there aren't ought claims to plants. It's specifically having motivations to live. That's the ought.
Yeah, it's actors, practical agents, practical agents.
I mean, what he tried to do is reframe it as an efficiency question.
I've heard. In some way, ethics is about efficiency, but it's efficiency This is the difference between an objective view and a subjective view. So efficient towards what goal, right?
Yeah.
So like, you know, subjectivists do not evaluate or cannot evaluate goals. But objectivists can.
Like as an engineer, you can't just say efficiency in a vacuum. Like efficiency, you have to optimize
in relationship
for some
to goal.
Yeah, for some certain end. Like I can optimize an aircraft for maximum aerodynamics or for maximum thrust
or maximum crashing or maximum
crashing. Yeah, we could go
maximum explosion
program. Yeah, you can optimize like some certain variables given like, you know, some body plan or, you know, some situation, right? You have independent variables, right? And you can optimize your dependent variables. And you can do that, but you can't just say make this efficient. Like there's no efficiency independent of like something to make efficient, some end in
That's
mind.
just kicking the can down the road. Yeah,
exactly. So here's the thing that people get. The objectivist subjectivist distinction is like, I think a lot of people treat it. There's like a tendency in objectivism to treat odds as if they're intrinsic, or then not to understand, you know, and then treat them as subjective. The difference between an objective theory of ethics and a subjective theory of ethics, of course, both are conditional, but it's about being rational about your conditions. So it's not just like anything goes. There are some goals which are ultimate goals and you should pursue them, but you have to be rational about all that stuff. You have to identify them. That's the difference.
And they're like, well, all right, so life is the standard, right? And then they're like, why can't it be specifically only your life and not but why do you have to include, you know,
what is your life? It actually is just you. Other people are conditionally valuable to you.
Well, yeah, so like they'll be like, well, what if I'm a psychopath and I don't care?
Well, the problem with psychopathy is like, whenever you say you don't,
if I actually don't have any care for someone, yeah.
The problem is they think that the conditional is all the way through. So yeah, it's the fact that conditions are bound by reality. The conditional is open to you. You have one fundamental condition open to you. And it's living or not living, right? And when you choose to live, you do that because of your motivation. So your ultimate value is really a life of enjoyment. Okay. Now you can say, well, values are conditional, so I'm gonna go. I have the goal to, you know, molest lots of people, right? But I mean, that conditional is inconsistent with your prior requirements. So you're being irrational there. So it's not like you can just set the goal and you're good. You have to reconcile your goals with the facts of reality.
Yeah. I suppose.
Well, guys, this was an awesome conversation. I need to actually check out, but I really appreciate the conversation. Zulu, thanks for debating me, man. I'm glad to be on the server. If anybody wants to talk with me or, you know, have a conversation about any of this stuff, which I'd love to, just message me and then I'd love to, like, you know, set up a discussion. But I'm looking forward to, you know, talking to you guys, talking to Zulu more often.
Yeah, no worries.
We're going to track you down and we're going to build Hume's guillotine outside your front door. You know, you're going to open the front door and you're going to see the actual Hume's guillotine. It's right there.
Oh, shit.
Real quick.
Wait, why can't death be the standard of value?
What does it mean for something to be? Oh, well, I can explain that. But what was the other question, sir?
So you called a categorical imperative an anti-concept.
Yeah.
Not just an invalid concept. Why is it an anti-concept?
Well, it's an anti-concept for the same reason that duty is an anti-concept. So.
Okay.
Whenever
I don't know why duty is an anti-concept.
Okay. So let me make sure I'm defining my terms right. So an anti-concept, if I'm not mistaken, is like whenever a concept like tries to deny like the root of its reference. Is that right? Or am I wrong here?
That would be a stolen concept.
Right, but specifically an anti-concept. Let me look this up in the lexicon. Sorry. Concept is an unnecessary, rationally unusable term. You're designed to replace a legitimate concept. Yeah. So a categorical reason. The reason why a categorical reason exists is because of Hume's whole philosophy, where he's like, well, we need like a real, objective, universal absolute that's independent of human experiences. So we need a concept to guide human action, but to guide it towards no particular goal, and to guide it irrelevant to the need for guiding action at all. So normative concepts have a real valid basis, right? It's the need for human beings to live their lives and guide their actions towards motivation of achieving happiness. But categorical reasons are proposed solutions to that problem that then try to deny the reason the problem exists. It's not trying to guide you towards happiness or pleasure or anything to do with why you live. It's just trying to guide you to no end at all. That's why it's an anti-concept. It's rationally unusable. Like if you use an anti-concept, it gives you no insight as to how to achieve your goals.
Mm-hmm. And what, I guess, because an anti-concept is meant to obscure understanding of a genuine concept, which genuine concept is it obscuring?
It's obscuring the concept of a reason. So, for instance, take the instance of the dichotomy between subjective and objective normally in the world. It's obvious that the word objective has been hijacked by this anti-conceptual understanding of objective to mean independent of human experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right. That's why it's an anti-concept. That's why Ayn Rand needs the trichotomy to contrast the anti-concept from the real
intrinsic.
Concept. Yeah.
Right. I guess it's in the category of reality as it really is.
Right.
All right.
There was someone who asked, why can't death be the standard of value? And that's pretty simple. It's because values presuppose life. So if death is the standard of value, your standard value, you're in a contradiction.
Dead people don't value.
Well, it's even bigger than that. Let's think about what death is. So contrast death with living. So living is this process of entities acting to continue acting. Okay. So you can understand life as basically self-propelled motion. So living is. Living things are self-propelled moving. Now the antithesis of death would therefore be stillness. So dying is not the continuing of motion. It's not continuing motion in this way. It's non-motion. It's non-movement. So whenever someone says, well, why can't the standard of value be death? Well, what is a standard of value? Like a standard of value is something to guide your action towards some goal. Well, death is a non-goal. Death is non-action. Like it can't serve to guide you if the standard is like anti-action.
Yeah.
That's the problem with it.
Yeah,
maybe they frame it as death of
why can the standard not be anti-action?
Well, the standard for action can't be anti-action.
Why?
Right.
Because it's a standard for action, not anti-action.
So do you?
Oh, wait. But what if your goal is to end your own life, and then after that you won't be acting? But in order to do that, you need to act.
Well, it's like let's say you want to have the standard for a cupcake eating competition, right? The standard for who eats the most cupcakes. How would you determine who eats the most cupcakes? And the way we determine it is by whoever eats the least cupcakes.
Yeah.
Like the winner of the eating cupcake competition is whoever eats the less.
Yeah. Like it's just
the analogy.
The standard is denying the thing it's supposed to be a standard for. So
yeah, I think maybe the point is confusion is the fact that value has a distinct meaning. Like the standard of value can only be life, because values are things which you act to gain and or keep. You don't gain living. Or sorry. You don't gain death. You don't exist when death exists. So there is no gaining death. It's not something you can gain. Like I can gain food.
No, people can definitely act in order to kill themselves, right?
No, I'm not disagreeing that people can cause death, but they can't gain it. They cannot achieve death.
Well, hold on.
I cannot experience being dead.
Hold on. The fact that I think the definition of value is like acts to gain or keep, like that means intends to gain or keep, not, that it's actually possible to do so.
Well, something can't be acted to be
Also,
gained
like
or
a death is something you can gain. It's like you gain it and then you die.
you don't gain death. Death is dying.
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean? You can't gain it and then die.
I think
Gaining death is dying.
Death, I don't know.
You,
like,
you
I
don't.
think that's
Yeah, because you
what it is,
can't
no?
get death and then die.
You can. You can
Well,
bring
hold on.
about a situation where you're dead.
So what would it mean to gain death before I've and then died? How have I gained death?
The sequence is incorrect.
Okay, what does it mean to gain something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So the point is that values have this concept of occurrent benefit. So whenever you say something is being valued, it's valuable to the valuer, so the thing acting to gain it or keep it. You can't. An actor cannot gain death. An actor, of course, can cause death, but they can't gain it or keep it. Death can't be a value to a living thing.
Okay, do you differentiate between value and purpose? Like in the praxeological sense?
Well, and I mean, a purpose is just a motivation. So I mean, yeah, they're like distinct, I guess. But it's true that somebody could act towards death. I'm not disagreeing with that. The point is that they wouldn't ever be able to gain it or keep it. That's why it can't be a value in the moral sense.
Well, it can be, but it can't be a valid standard of value. It's like someone could say that their value is death, and then
It's a metaphysical possible.
Philosophically,
But I'm saying it's impossible for it to be a. Sorry, are you approaching this from like a praxeological perspective? Because if so, then there's like another thing I could say on that. But
Yeah.
The incompleteness with the praxeological approach of value. So it is true that actions are purposeful. I'll grant that. But if you understand that whenever you act, you're acting to gain and or keep something. The problem with that is that there are like actual, real requirements of what it means to gain and or keep something. So it's true that someone's purposes can be whatever they want, but that doesn't mean that the thing can actually be a value. So a value isn't just something you act towards, right? In order for something to be a value, you have to, actually be able to gain it.
For instance, could my value be to defy gravity? Probably not.
Right. So it's like, of course, we're not saying it's impossible to pursue those things. We're saying that if you apply reason to your pursuits, it's impossible to claim that as a value because you can never achieve it.
This seems like a very like technicality moment. Like I'm not sure.
Well, the reason why is because let's understand the need for an action guiding code, right? The need for an action guiding code is because of your volition, right? So you have all these alternative possibilities open to you. The question is, how do you act, or how should you act? Well, why should I act at all? Let's just ask the meta question. Well, I should act to achieve positive emotional experiences. Okay, so I should act for enjoyment. And so given that, something cannot be claimed to be a value unless it's consistent with that. Which is to say then that if I declare something as a value, or I say that I should guide my action towards that thing, it's contradictory to understanding my goal as positive emotional experiences to say that I should act towards something that I can't emotionally positively benefit from, i.e. something I can't gain in or keep. That's why it's relevant. It's not like a semantic technicality. It has to do with like guiding your action.
Why would you think you value death other than just you hate life?
Okay, well, I mean, suppose you have cancer and you just want to reduce your suffering or something.
Are you asking, is that a good thing to do?
Well, could it be a good thing to do?
I think in some cases maybe, but like if it's extremely painful. But
well, hold on. But then, how could it be good in some cases if you're then saying that death is a value in those cases, and death is something you cannot gain?
it's not about death being a value. It's the fact that there are no values anymore. So the distinction here is that whenever you treat death, well, no, because think about it. When I'm saying it's contextualist on this, so the standard of value is living an enjoyable life. Okay. And so if your life is no longer enjoyable, according to the standard of value as life, as a, you know, as an enjoyable thing, your life is no longer valuable. That doesn't mean that you should pursue death. That's not the point being made here. The point is that you just shouldn't live anymore. That's not a positive prescription towards death. It's just a negative description towards life, which, you know, the subsequent consequence of not being committed to living is dying. But death wouldn't be a value then. Death would be like a surrender from values.
Right.
I guess an interesting question. Could you value being in the state of dying? Because that is something you can acquire.
No, that's irrational.
Bleeding out. Yeah.
It's the same reason why. Here's like something I had to think
valuing
about.
Suffering.
Yeah, here's the thing I had to think about actually. So death, life or death is a fundamental alternative, right? So it's like it is actually impossible to value death, right? Or it's impossible to say that a living thing can value dying. That doesn't make sense. However, there are different types of living. So it's actually, you know, you can live a suffering life. You can live a sad life. You can also live a happy life and enjoyable life. So then the question is like, well, like why should you live a happy life as opposed to a sad life, right? Both are consistent with life as a standard of value. And it all has to do with reducing the concept of why and should to motivation. That's my solution. It's also just like, think of it like this. Whenever you pursue a sad life, let's say you value that. When you pursue a sad life, existentially, what are you pursuing? Like, what are the causes behind a sad life? And you know, if you understand
negative emotional experiences.
Yeah. But what are the causes of a negative emotional experience? Like the objective answer is
your
that,
values. Exactly
right. Like the objective answer is like the sadness and pain are the conscious experiencing of death. So, like, you know, it's obviously inconsistent to hold life as a standard and then go do sad things, because doing sad things is, you know, inadvertently killing you.
Okay, so but if maximizing like pleasurable experiences is the motivation, then you could say that the cancer victim ought to like pump himself full of heroin instead of taking chemotherapy or something.
Well, it depends on the goal. Like, will heroin, like, have they valued
happy?
Well, I guess it kind of depends on the reality of the situation. Like, has it been ruled out that their cancer is like treatable?
Has it been ruled out that their cancer is treatable? Well, here's the thing. Like, suppose even it hasn't been ruled out, right? But even then, it's like, can we really?
Well, that should be ruled out. They're
not ruled out, and they still do it.
Yeah, that'd be irrational, because then they'd be neglecting this future of positive experiences.
So, is there some kind of calculus is there some kind of like calculation that they have to do?
You can do like you can ordinally rank the value of things to you.
You can ordinarily, yeah, sure. But what makes it such that some length of time of future positive experiences outweighs the, you know, whatever.
That's what I'm saying. It's not. It's ordinal. So it's you take you concretize the possibilities.
But Rand takes the position that it's ordinal, but there's a right and wrong about which order to put them in, right? So well, presumably which would make it reverse the. Say that again.
Yeah, she thinks that you can be mistaken in the way that you rank them. The question is, how do you rank them? You're asking by what metric?
Yeah, right? That is what I'm asking you. Yeah, and because I think you would agree that, let's say if it wasn't treatable, then I mean, yeah, you should like pump yourself full of heroin, just enjoy the last days of your life.
Yeah, the kind of calculus done there is by weighing those alternatives against the standard of value, and by weighing your value significance towards each of them.
The only reason the standard of value is valuable is because it maximizes like. Okay. Explain to me, like, why is the standard of value needed to make an ethic?
Well, an ethical is just what is it? Well, what is it? Oh, so the objectivist ethics?
Well, yeah, because like presumably the standard of life is just supposed to like guide you towards pursuing those values that will make you happy, right?
Have an enjoyable life, yeah.
To have an enjoyable life.
There's a good question here in that how long must your life be in, like in the chemotherapy question, right? Like, how do you determine whether it's more worth it to go through painful chemotherapy for a longer life, or just have a very, very enjoyable?
Oh, yeah, those kind of apply. Yeah, those kind of applied ethical questions. There are like possible answers you can give them. I will say just from the outset that nothing about Ayn Rand's ethics turns on the answer to these conclusions. By the way. I can say one thing and say you should weigh them by your value significance that you have for them. And you could be like, well, that's an awful standard. It's like, okay, I guess I'm wrong, right? But the objectivist ethics would still maintain, its validity. Like the normative ethics are relevant from my, applied ethical commitment or something.
Okay, so you're not like wedded to any particular prescriptions.
I am, just not on that specific case example. I mean, like for me, the things that are relevant to me is it's essentially you ask this question, is it worth it? Is it like if you look at your future and you see this future of pain and suffering, is it worth it? Now, if you start weighing alternatives, yeah, I weigh on this precautionary side that you should hold out so you can have better experiences, which is why I generally say you shouldn't just kill yourself prematurely. You should be objective about your future. But yeah,
right. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Yeah, because like the utilitarian answer is measure the utils you would receive via heroin suicide versus the utils from your future life and compare them.
Well, I mean, I want to say that I don't even think utilitarianism does an awful thing there. I mean, like hedonic calculus, I think objectivists have to do that too. But we just say it in like a different way, like judging something's value significance is like the same thing. Now, of course, the reason why we don't have a problem that utilitarians do, where you have to compare the value significance across people. Yeah, I don't know how to do that. I have no idea how to do that. But just personal experience.
That's why.
You say what?
It's invalid to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not just that you don't know.
Yeah, the standard of value is agent relative, so it doesn't make sense to. It's like the same problem with trying to have two competing ultimate values. That's another thing. God, I love objectivism.
So wait, okay, you just like restate why death can't be a standard value is because you can't gain it, right?
Yeah, it's because you couldn't benefit from it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, okay, I'll get nasty with the praxeology, right? Praxeology says you should, whenever humans act, they act to ease a state of uneasiness, whatever that means. You can't. The concept of praxeology presupposes psychological consequence on the actor. So I mean, like, it doesn't make sense to say that you could rationally value something you couldn't benefit from.
I think
not like you just value some things like more than others. Like it's not like value subjective. There's also like disvalue. Like there's some things you'd rather do.
I think the specific praxeologic claim is just that by rational you just mean purposeful, like having volition, basically. Like this is a behavior which is rational, not meaning it was rationally considered, yada yada yada, ethical claim. Rather that this is a rational being who made this decision.
Right. Yeah. When I say rational, I'm using the objectivist word.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think praxeology is fine as far as it goes, honestly.
Yeah, it just creates semantic confusion because the words are like used in different they're used in a different context than what objectivists say. But there's like this neat article series written by this guy synthesizing the two.
Who's the guy?
If you go on YouTube and you type in Austrian economic subjectivism, I think it's on New Ideal, or not on New Ideal. It's on ARI.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
Hold on. Is it
I think it's
Junkin?
right. Probably, I think so.
Yeah, Junkin's pretty good. Or Junkins, rather.
Yeah. Wait, so the debate that was occurring was on the one I saw that you were live streaming. You were live streaming a debate on the NAP with that guy? The guy who left earlier, Anarcheosis?
Yes, so the initial debate was on my justification of the NEP. That went into, well, how do you establish ethics in the first place? And then he bounced across a few different other topics. I can pull up my flow right now, actually. Yeah, he wanted to talk about open borders with me, and he wanted to talk about, like, his idea was that technological advancements like the internet would like basically necessitate that the state's going to be destroyed. I disagreed with that because I hold the philosophical theory of history, like you got to change the philosophy for the state to be destroyed. Like it's not going to just go away on its own.
Right.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting stuff.
So many end caps in a server, man. Oh my god.
Yeah, that's my server, baby.
I sent something a while ago in the VC chat. It was from J.W. Rich's book, Praxeological Ethics.
Oh, I looked into that guy after you sent it.
There's a guy in the Austrian Econ Discord server. And one thing I really liked in it was his how he defined oughts. Basically, let me see if I can find the image again.
All prescriptive statements can be reduced to propositions that are about achieving.
Put it back into the thing.
Yeah.
It's at the bottom of VC text now.
I can just post it again. Okay, nice. Yeah, so murder is bad is the same as saying murder exists. I'm an actor in the praxeological sense. I have a goal in mind that I wish to achieve, and murder prevents or can prevent these goals from being accomplished.
Yeah, he's those are definitely, yeah. I like that aspect of what he said. I read a little bit of his book, and he like very loosely uses the terms objective and subjective, and he's also a Kantian, so there's that whole problem.
Right. Right. He does say a priori.
Yeah. Well, he starts talking. Yeah. But I mean, the praxeological reasoning, if you give it a philosophical life raft and incorporate it and integrate it with objectivism, it's good. But like the Kantian approach is just like, it's like awful.
But like I think this framing of oughts as this series of four is statements, and I don't know if he's generalized this, but it seems like all of his examples are just these four statements. I think this belongs in any book about ethics. Like this, you need to repeat this information. And you should be using it as a trademark.
I'll actually say that I don't know how like Wellspring is in the server, but Wellspring actually says something really similar, where all statements about ought are actually reducible to causal statements about the causality of achieving happiness.
To answer the first question is not very well liked.
I see.
I had a question. You were talking about theories of history, right? And I was thinking, what do you think of the great man theory of history? Because I feel that, whilst the philosophy itself is very important, I think it's always going to be like maybe not a single person, but like at least a clique of like these quote unquote great men, which will like bring forward the age of this new philosophy, or how you want to put it.
Hard men in great times and
Great.
Yeah. So
great men are shaped by their philosophy.
Yeah. So I think that's just completely insufficient to describe how the history of many men will develop, like what choices many men will make. What you gotta consider what is the most fundamental set of beliefs, and philosophy is exactly what those fundamental beliefs are. So you can't just have a great man, in Nietzschean terms, come up and just say, hey, we're going to do this, that, and the other thing, and then everybody goes along with him. He's going to have to spread some philosophy or cash in on a philosophy that was already spread by someone else, right? Because if Adolf Hitler, he definitely considered himself a Nietzschean great man. If he were to try and rise up in a rational society and just, do it was like, yeah, hing, bing, shangling, this big old, he was a great orator. His eyes, deep blue eyes, right? It's not going to work, right? Because people are just not going to listen to him. He'll be a crazy standing on the side of the street. If he has the philosophy of Kant, which he can cash in on, and everybody already accepts the philosophy of Kant, then it's a lot easier for him. Then he can start doing what he wants to do. So great men simply can't be the drivers of history. They've just got to work with what the philosophy is, right?
I should disagree with this because Javier Milei is a counterexample to that.
No.
The example I would
is because the guy, there was another guy that he even endorsed that ran on the same platform as him from the same party, and he won like 3%.
Okay, well, how does that establish that great men are the drivers of history?
And that was like 3 years. 3 years prior. Well, because Milei would have been the great man that made the difference between 3% and fucking 56%.
Yeah, but great man, the causal impact of the great man is insofar as there's like a culture that accepts a philosophy and there's a man who accepts a philosophy.
Maybe it's my bias.
Change the entire world.
Maybe it's my bias because I mostly studied currently like communist China and post-communist like Eastern Europe, and essentially of like in these places like China and Russia, like I would say that the peasant class, like the most people, they didn't really even have an ideology. So when Lenin, for example, showed up, he could have spouted anything. He was just like in the right position.
They definitely had an ideology. This is philosophy who needs it, right? Everybody has a philosophy, right?
No, yeah, but in a sense that it wasn't really developed philosophy.
Right, but if Lenin had come about,
if I developed correct, then okay.
If Lenin had come about in Athens, right? He's not just going to suddenly be able to have communism, because he would require Kant and Hegel and Hume. He'd require all of the previous philosophy to get there. Like, he's not the philosopher here.
I think I understand. Yeah, I would agree with that, but
and so on the Milei point,
I just say I'm most correct.
Sure, I can accept that being a more charismatic guy can get you more votes in an election. But the fundamental point is that if every single person in Argentina, except for Milei, was a communist, then Milei's not going to get voted in, ever, no matter how charismatic he is.
Yeah, but Milei was the one who changed that, right?
Well, I mean,
they weren't communists to start with. I think
he might have changed it not in his capacity as a politician, but in his capacity as an educator. Sure, but that is spreading a different philosophy, is the point.
That's fine, but he's still a great man doing all that, and then
right. But that doesn't mean that great men are the driver of history. That means that philosophy is the driver of history, because he had to spread a different philosophy.
I mean, would it be accurate to say that the philosophy is the engine and the great men are like the guys at the wheel?
I mean, it depends on specifically who they are. I think politicians as such are just thermometers. They just follow the political temperature. Setting the political temperature, this is a visual from Leonard Reed. Setting the political temperature means changing the philosophy. Right? And changing the philosophy doesn't consist of, wow, that guy was super charismatic, now we all believe different things.
So Liquid Zulu, would you say the opposite of the great man theory. So as opposed to these unique and heroic or highly insightful individuals putting forth like a new theory that people kind of fall into line with because it's more consistent or more logical than previous theories, is your point of contention that the people who seem like great men or women in the case of Rand are actually just putting their finger to the social winds and then formalizing
No.
ideas that already exist?
That wasn't my claim. That is my claim for politicians.
Okay, I was just making sure.
So my claim with respect to
So you
what is
don't
the
think that they're
my claim with respect to what is the fundamental driver of history, why do men make these different choices at these different eras? It's not because some great guy rose up and was really charismatic and then suddenly everybody had to believe him. It was that they are establishing some new philosophy. And so Rand would not get anywhere with her philosophy if she didn't answer Kant, if she didn't answer Hume, if she didn't answer these people, if she just republished Aristotle's works, nothing would have changed, right? She had to answer these old philosophies because she was trying to change the philosophy. Changing the philosophy is what's required, which is why we're not all Nazis, right? Hitler, very charismatic guy, but we don't just instantly go for whoever is most charismatic in the room.
Okay, but
Here's the thing, I don't think changing philosophy is required for like gaining political power, right? And then
yeah, but, okay, but what philosophy? Yeah, but what philosophy did Genghis Khan install?
I don't think Genghis Khan installed. I don't think he was a philosopher. I think he's cashing in on a philosophy.
Yeah, he wasn't. So, but he didn't certainly like impact history to like a huge degree. No.
Hold on. Right, he's not the primary driver of history, though. He's just the effect. In the same way that Hitler is not the big driver of this stuff, he's just cashing in on what Hegel already taught all of Europe. Right, Hegel is the driver there, and Hegel was just cashing in what Kant gave us. Right? And this is why Kant is the most evil man who's ever lived.
Yeah, so Liquid Zulu, what you're saying to me describes the great man theory, unless you think that anybody who wasn't Ayn Rand could have formalized the school of thought called objectivism. So to me, I think the precise people who did come up with these new philosophical systems, the person who I value most in philosophy is Stefan Molyneux. I don't think someone else who, I don't know, is some asshole named Craig could have came up with UPB. I don't think some other person other than Rand could have came up with objectivism, so on and so forth. Do you think that is the case?
Kant came up with UPB, but okay.
Well, I don't think there's something special with Rand where nobody else could have possibly come up with those same discoveries in philosophy. Like, I don't see how that would be the case at all. Like, I mean, we've seen this already with discoveries in math. Hold on. We've seen this already with discoveries in mathematics. Like, we have uncovered manuscripts from ancient Greece where they had discovered calculus. And then, of course, later on, both Leibniz and Newton also independently discovered calculus. So if discoveries in mathematics can be discovered by multiple different people over time, why on earth would it be any different for philosophy?
So I completely agree with your question. I would just say the three people who came up with those, or who made those discoveries rather, those three people would be great men. And where I'm coming from this is the fact that praxeology uses methodological individualism. So to me, to say philosophy moves things forward, that's not applying methodological individualism, because philosophy is an abstraction. And I think instances, aka individuals, would be the things to employ the tool of philosophy to move history forward.
Okay, yeah, I'm not denying that individual people have to come up with these ideas. That was not my claim. My claim isn't that, oh, they're just so charismatic and confident, and they're just such a Nietzschean great man, that therefore everybody has to follow them suddenly. Because they can't make just arbitrary claims in philosophy. Like, if Hitler was not cashing in on Kantianism, it wouldn't work, right? It just would not work. You don't get a Renaissance Hitler. You could not get a Renaissance Hitler. You have to wait for philosophy to be degraded down to the point of
What about
Hume,
Rousseau?
and then at the point of Hume, then you can get either a new Plato or a new Aristotle. We got a new Plato in the form of Immanuel Kant, right? And then the dictators can cash in on Immanuel Kant, right? It simply would not be possible if you had a rational society for somebody, like what actually makes someone a great man, right? Is it just someone who's super charismatic and, a real electrifying person? That they're electrifying and charismatic doesn't imply that they will get any sort of support. They have to work with what the philosophy is or introduce some new philosophy. And if they're introducing a new philosophy, then they have to answer the philosophers before them.
Yeah. So to be clear, I completely agree with what you just said, and I think you're putting too much of a premium on charisma. So if you Google great man theory, it just says highly influential and unique, and this could be due to intellect, courage, other virtues, their leadership abilities. So I don't put like a higher premium on charisma.
Highly influential.
For example,
Let's deal with highly influential, right? The question is, hold on.
Logical consistency.
Hold on.
Sorry.
There are two ways you could be highly influential. Either you're cashing in on the philosophy of the day, or you're bringing about some new philosophy, right? If you're cashing in the philosophy of the day, you're not any sort of primary driver of history. You're just another effect of what the philosophy of the day is, right? If you are bringing about some new philosophy, then you have to answer the philosophies prior in order to push that philosophy. But it's still the philosophy which is the fundamental driver here. You're just trying to change what the philosophy is, not being this great man, highly influential, and then people just follow you for no reason at all.
So, as an example, if Kant would have taken control of, Germany didn't really exist at the time, but if he had for example, taken control of Germany, right, would he then be a great man? Like if he creates the ideology and actually spreads it at the same time?
Well, he did create and spread.
Would you allow a scenario like that? He did,
again, my claim was never that there are no great men, right? That was never my claim. My claim was simply that they are not the primary driver of history. Being influential is not the primary driver of history.
New ideologies, how do new philosophies form? Just by building up on the previous ones?
They have to answer the previous ones and bring something new about, or else they're just a derivative.
Well, yeah. And wouldn't doing that make you this quote-unquote great man?
Sure, you can call that a great man if you want, but that doesn't mean that the great men are the primary drivers of history. They had to change the philosophy to do this, right? That is what they're doing to be what you're classing as a great man. They're changing the philosophy. They're not just this electrifying, influential person, and then suddenly they can just do whatever they want. That isn't how it happens.
Yeah, he's ignoring military conquest.
No, I'm not ignoring military conquest. Explain to me how military conquest at all negates my theory.
Well, because hold on. So because it's not.
So let's say I am Adolf Hitler, and I'm born in the Renaissance, and I want to engage in a massive military conquest to take over the entire world. How do I do this? I'm just a lone Adolf Hitler, and I don't have any Kant, I don't have any Hume, I don't have any Hegel, I can't cash in on any of that. How do I take over the world in a great military conquest? Just me and my bare hands.
No, you can't, of course.
But, yeah, there you go. Brilliant. So military conquest is completely fucking irrelevant here.
Revolution versus... No.
American Revolution, the American revolutionaries, they were cashing in on the somewhat more rational, somewhat more this worldly philosophy given to us by the British empiricists, people like Locke.
They could have lost, is the point.
What?
If they lost, the point is they could have lost, and then they would not have they would not have seceded.
That doesn't change. That doesn't change the philosophy, though. Doesn't change the philosophy.
It doesn't change the philosophy.
The philosophy is the fundamental here.
Change history in a major way.
Okay, right. So I'm not saying that the philosophy of the day that people accept will tell you what the McDonald's logo will be, right? That is a massive, very, very, very far down the chain. I'm not saying that every single outcome of every single thing ever, you can just go, oh, it was a Hegelian philosophy of the day, so it's going to be this, right? I'm talking in broad strokes here, because philosophy is the broadest abstractions you can get, and we're talking in broad strokes about history, not the outcome of some specific battle.
But here's the thing, like the outcome of some specific battle can be very influential for like centuries. So
not fundamentally influential.
I mean, sure, like it takes a certain philosophy to maintain it. If you wish.
Let's say the American revolutionaries failed. Like, that doesn't actually change anything about what the philosophy that people accept.
Right, I mean, there's a pretty brutal example.
No. The claim wasn't that philosophy is influential philosophy. The claim was that it's the philosophy is influential on what course history takes, right? So if the American Revolution was lost, do you not think history would have been substantially different?
I agree that it would be quite different, but not fundamentally so.
Bro.
It would be like saying you can.
Why do you think it would be different? Just answer your own question here. Why do you think it would be different?
The Revolutionary War was lost. Well, if there wasn't any America, like I mean, well, first of all, a lot of countries wouldn't have become wouldn't have moved away from monarchies and become republics. There would be no French Revolution. There would probably
there would have been a
Soviet
French Revolution.
Arose, like there'd probably be nobody to counter it. We would not have like the single greatest example of capitalism, so that it would not spread to other countries.
Do you suppose this might be because of the philosophies these people endorse?
And capitalism spread because of Britain.
Hold on.
Who endorses? What are you talking about?
The different outcome.
No. I'm saying if the philosophies stay the same, but they lost, the Americans lost some key battles in the Revolutionary War.
And then the outcome of the Revolutionary War was different.
Correct.
It was hypothetical.
You can't.
So then things would be different.
I mean, to be fair, Britain down the line kind of adapted a lot of these very not liberal in the traditional sense of policies. So
I don't even know what that was. But,
you can't stop the spread of new ideas just by killing everyone.
I mean, America was never going to return to a wholly endorsed monarchical society. I mean, British society at that time itself was moving away from the monarchy. George III was the last influential king. So even if the American Revolution was lost, the philosophy of the day was still veering into the direction of liberty. So that would not have changed. And I mean, the British Empire would still have collapsed, period. I mean, there's no British Empire today. And the fundamental reason is that the philosophy changed. The philosophy that undergirded the British Empire dissolved and the empire went with it. So no single battle or war like the American Revolution by itself can turn the nexus of history such as you claim.
I don't think he knows his own claim.
The philosophy would have been like not a dampening factor. Let's say it would have the average level of liberty would have corresponded to the average would have corresponded to how much the broad public would accept the philosophy of liberty. I would agree with that, but that's just one of the factors that drives history. I'm not really sure if it's that fundamental. Like,
hold on.
How you would falsify that?
Yes. So
yeah,
it is one of the factors which drives history. It's not the only factor. Another factor would be which flavor of ice cream your Auntie Jane decided to buy last week at the store. I agree that is true. But the question is, which is more fundamental? Which is the fundamental? And when it comes to the course of history over massive nations, millions and millions of people, over great spans of time, would it be which flavor of ice cream your Auntie Jane decided to buy, or the philosophy that people hold? I think it's pretty clear which one of those is the fundamental here. And if you think maybe there's a different choice here for fundamental, what is the other choice for fundamental here? Which isn't the philosophy that people accept. What is it?
I mean, the competing hypothesis of the great man theory, for example.
Is that the one you want to endorse?
No, but I haven't heard a convincing enough refutation of it because, as the other guy pointed out, like these philosophies, like can be attributed to great men.
So I will restate the refutation that it's just great men that drive history, because there are great men that are just cashing in on whatever philosophy is available, right? So the question is it these cashers in, these Adolf Hitlers and such, or is it the philosophers who are presenting the philosophy, right? Because you can't just say, well, it's a great man, and of course those philosophers, they are great men. Like, that's ludicrous as a refutation of the philosophical theory of history. Like, it's, oh yes, of course it is the philosophy that is driver of history, but I'm just going to call that great man theory. Like, that isn't what great man theory means. Like, oh, well, the men were great. Like, okay, cool.
Okay. What about the example of someone like Lee Kuan Yew, right? So in Singapore, there was no broad philosophy of like economic freedom or anything like that. The guy took power through very, let's say, Machiavellian means, and instituted an economic policy, right, that took his country down a very different path than if, say, the socialists had come.
So I want you to explain
the reason
to
why
me.
Socialists didn't.
So you're asserting that basically everyone else in this country wanted total communism or something like that, and this guy was like, "No, we're doing Ankabistan." I want you to explain to me how it is the case that these people would go along with anything he's saying. Like, did he just overpower them all? Like, is he Omni-Man or
My
something?
claim wasn't that everybody else is. My claim wasn't that everybody else is passionate about communism. There, the claim is more that they were undecided, and the communists had very effective means of propaganda. So the way he fought them wasn't through refuting their philosophy as much as really just infiltrating their party and then just like killing people. Yeah.
But okay, well, he must have changed the philosophy
Which
at some point. Or else he's just a really, really strong guy who can just wrangle everyone to do what he wants.
No. But here's the thing, right? The philosophy here could have been changed as a result of people seeing the benefits of economic freedom, right? And then they independently come up with like, they independently realize that, freedom leads to prosperity, blah blah blah. But
Hold
then,
on.
like, I guess the criterion of fundamentality here is like what causes what, right?
Yeah, it's about what is the fundamental driver of history. Is it people who are just real great guys, real charismatic people, like, electrifying on stage and whatnot? Are they the primary driver of history, or is it the philosopher? My claim is that it's the philosopher, which is a different archetype to the great man. Like, I'm speaking in archetypes here.
Okay, and do you think is it the philosopher? Okay, so I guess if you count what the Americans had at the time of the revolution, a philosophy.
Yeah, they were cashing in on a pro-reason philosophy.
Well, okay, so can you maybe the founding fathers were, but like the broad population, I'm not sure they were that well read on philosophy.
Well, the founding fathers, they cashed in on that philosophy because the broad population accepted it. That's how they were able to cash in on it.
So how would you say that the broad population of America pre-revolution had accepted a philosophy of liberty? Was it like through their Protestantism or something?
Well, no, they accepted it because they were living in a completely new world. They didn't have a king. They didn't have this grand bureaucracy. Nothing was given to them. They literally had to build their own lives. They had to be independent, productive men. They had to be free to build a society.
But I don't think that's fundamental either. I think why. So then the question is, why was it America which had this more freedom philosophy? I think it's quite clear that it's brain drain, right? They were fleeing from Europe, from the authoritarianism, from the absolutism in Europe, and the best are going to flee first, right? So then you have the best in America, the people who are least tolerant to totalitarianism, people like John Locke, right? They're the ones who are going to be going off to America. Those followers of this worldly rationalism. Sorry, not rationalism, but rational philosophy.
It was mostly people who were persecuted for their religion who fled first.
Okay. That does not negate what I said.
So, you think they were the best?
Yes, the ones who went to America, went to the New World, they were the best of Europe, broadly speaking.
I mean, like the ones who would have come later might have been, but I mean, the ones who came first, I'm pretty sure were simply fleeing. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm like not that well versed in American history.
Broadly speaking, at the time of the American Revolution, the people who were there were the ones who most accepted a this worldly, freedom-oriented philosophy.
So Puritans.
I don't know whether the Puritans.
Would you say that the Puritans?
Broadly speaking,
well,
speaking, not speaking about just one group in America. Broadly speaking, the people in America.
No, but
at the
like,
hold on.
Are you driving this a priori, or is it based on
1 second? Broadly speaking, the people in America at the time of the American Revolution and in the years running up to it, they were the best who had fled Europe or descendants of them and who were more freedom-oriented than anyone else around. That is how the Founding Fathers were able to cash in on a this-worldly, freedom-oriented philosophy in order to get their revolution going. If it wasn't the case, if that did not happen, if they were all communists, then it would be a communist revolution.
Okay, I don't think that claim is justified because they could have developed.
You don't think
so
the
it could have been like
hold on.
It could have been like in Australia, for example.
You don't think the claim is justified
Yeah, I'll explain why.
that the people having a freedom-oriented philosophy is what caused it to be a freedom-oriented revolution, and if they had a communist-oriented philosophy, then it would be a communist revolution. You think that is just completely baseless?
The specific claim that I don't think is justified is that they had the freest. They were either the best or had the freest philosophy at the time of fleeing. So I think they could have developed that philosophy based on the, whatever the frontier way of life that you had to pursue in America, otherwise you would simply starve, right? So they could have developed their values in the course of tilling the earth and just living off of it, etc.
There are plenty of people who have been in horrible situations, hard situations where they could really benefit from this worldly philosophy, who completely denied it, like medieval Europe, right? That was worse than the American
But America
frontier.
was not just...
Like it's
much worse,
the explorer mentality, right? It's the explorer mentality, going out into the new world and pushing forth, right? It's that explorer mentality. That is why I'm identifying them as the best of Europe.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying the American frontier was horrible. I'm saying it was a combination of it required a lot of self-responsibility, but because there was a lot of very fertile soil there and a lot of space to move into, it not only required self-responsibility, but it really handsomely rewarded it, right? So they could have just formed that those set of values through induction, right? Just by observing.
You would be also handsomely rewarded by self-responsibility any time in history, right? Because it's self-responsibility.
No, not under despotic rule, not under monarchies, blah blah blah.
Well, no more so than the other people, right? So if you're in medieval Europe and you're like a great Randian, like if you're Howard Rourke in medieval Europe, you're also going to be very competent, right? Competence is always a good thing.
Sure, but competence always was rewarded. But the question isn't whether the value is competence, right? The question is whether it's self-responsibility, independence, and etc. And I guess in medieval times, you'd probably be more rewarded for.
You can't be a competent second-hander. You could be competent at being second-handed, but you're not going to be competent in the general sense. Like Peter Keating is not competent.
What is no? I don't think competence exists in the general sense. I think competence is just.
Do you think Peter Keating is competent?
Peter Keating? No, he's not. But
right.
But he's a dramatization.
Because he's a second-hander. That's why he's not competent.
Yeah. That's correct, but nobody's like 100% of a second-hander, right? Most people are second-handers in some issues, and then
right, and that's why I wanted to bring up the fictional example to highlight the essence, because we're talking about essences here.
Sure. Yeah, yes, but you misapplied it to the real world by saying that if you're conformist in one area, you are necessarily incompetent in all areas, right?
I didn't say that,
and that's not the case. People. Well, hold on. So in that case, you can be competent and yet still value complacency and fitting within the. Because that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what was happening in medieval Europe, right? Which people might have been competent like guildsmen or whatever, but they had to they had to conform to like Christian values. They had to conform to whatever their guild was saying.
So, like, when we're talking about the driver of history, millions and millions of men, we can't talk about specific individual people and what they do. Right? We have to speak in broad strokes, which means we have to get down to these essentials.
Which I did, because in like
and
in Europe,
if we're
like, this
getting
was
down
the
to the
case basically
essentials,
everywhere.
then we're going to get down to the philosophy of the day. And the philosophy of the day is not whichever man was most influential. He's the president, so, and he says we should all be communists now, so now we're all communists. Like, that's ludicrous.
No. So I'm defending a different claim now, right? So I'm defending the claim that the philosophy could have developed as a adaptation to new circumstances, right? The way in on the American frontier there was a lot of land which people moved in and tilled independently, as opposed to like being feudal serfs, because in because in Europe,
this is sort of a natural selection type of thing.
Whatever.
The people who are going to be best at pushing out into the frontier, the explorers, they're going to have to adopt a this worldly philosophy. It's just a natural
They're going to have to
selection
adopt it,
type
sure,
thing.
yeah. But
Which is
they
why,
wouldn't
which
have,
is
but
exactly
my
my
point is,
claim
like, we wouldn't have had
with
to
respect
adopt
to the
it from-
Americans being more this worldly, more rational. And that is why
Yeah, but
the
my point is
American
they wouldn't have had
Revolution
to
was a
get it from
freedom-oriented
philosophers.
one. It's still the philosophy of the day.
Yeah, but again, they wouldn't have.
Right? It's just the frontier is selecting for
They-
the philosophy of the day being this worldly.
Yes, but they wouldn't have had to get it from like Aristotle or John Locke or anybody else. They could have
Okay,
developed
hold
it
on.
completely by themselves.
So you think if Aristotle had never been born, let's just say Aristotle never born, do you think the American Revolution could have happened?
Do I think the American Revolution could have happened?
Mhm.
I don't know, because I actually don't know like how influential Aristotle was in that.
Well, so without Aristotle, you don't get Thomas Aquinas to reintroduce Aristotle, so you get complete faith throughout Europe, right? Just complete otherworldly Platonism, right? And if you have complete otherworldly Platonism, I want to know how exactly it is you expect that you could have a this worldly explorer mentality people going out and founding a free nation. How could that possibly occur without any
They
Aristotle?
could have developed this worldly philosophy. Like I
Okay,
said.
so then so they would have to develop a philosophy. So you'd have to get some Aristotle equivalent in there, which is exactly my claim.
No, you wouldn't have had somebody to write it out and develop it explicitly. People could have taken it as their rule of thumb, and developed these values through, like trial and error.
Right, but how would that not also apply to Europe though? Why would Plato have been able to take over in Europe?
Well, it wouldn't apply to most places because of the long history of
long history.
let's
Hold
say
on.
oppressive
But
institutions
at one
there in
point,
America.
Europe was a frontier,
Yeah,
right?
At one point, Europe was a frontier.
I mean,
Yeah,
the people going to America were Europeans. That's like completely senseless claim. Like they're the same people. Like
But I'm talking about back, like early days, back in like ancient Greek times, right? There were European frontiers. So why did these frontiers not necessitate that suddenly they're going to have a freedom-oriented philosophy? Why didn't that happen? Why is it that we had to have Aristotle come along? Without Aristotle, would Plato have just not been able to take over Europe? Because he did take over Europe with Aristotle.
I mean, in European history, as I see it, right? Because like most places, like that, I say lost to Christianity, which essentially is Platonism in itself, like a special form. Like most of the places that eventually lost it, like had it happen so that a part of that group actually converted to Christianity, not that they completely got conquered. Although that was a possibility.
Yeah, I'm not asserting it's a conquering. I'm asserting like a military thing. I'm asserting it's a philosophical conquering.
I mean, yeah, but in Europe there's a lot of physical conquering as well.
Sure, whatever. Right, that is irrelevant. Is my point.
Yeah, but if the people would have kept believing that it's wrong, they probably wouldn't have
thing is, hold
gotten
on,
so subjugated.
Plato didn't really introduce the idea of despotism, right? That was, I mean, I think even Rand claims he brought it he
I didn't
oriented
claim
himself
that
more
Plato
towards
introduced
the
despotism.
East. Mm-hmm. Right. So it's not as if Europe was like that solely due to like Plato's influence, right?
Plato is the fundamental driver of medieval Europe. That is how Christianity took over.
It's that under Plato's philosophy, despotism makes sense.
Yeah, because the collective is the really real thing, and you're just a cell of the collective body. That's how you get the collectivism. I think it's very obvious that if you don't have any individualist, this worldly philosophers, if none of them were ever born, you're not going to get any sort of freedom-oriented revolution. It just simply would not happen. Like, this is obvious. But anyway, I will leave you now. So, see
Who
ya.
was the counter to?
Oop.